Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Today, we're not just taking a drive, we're venturing deep into the sun-scorched highways of California, where beauty turns to dread and every lonely mile holds a secret waiting to be found. From phantom passengers to mirrors that steal more than your reflection, these are 20 true road trip nightmares. And every single one left someone scarred. But before we shift into gear, listen closely. Most viewers make one fatal mistake. They don't subscribe. And by the time they want to come back for more, it's already too late. The darkness doesn't wait, so do it now. Subscribe, because what's crawling behind the next mile marker isn't a pothole. It's something much worse, and hey, tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Because today is just beginning for you. But for someone else out there, it's already over. Let's hit the road. Out on Route 66, somewhere past Amboy but not quite to Essex, there's a stretch of two-lane road that cuts through the Mojave like a knife through meat straight, hot, indifferent. The kind of place where the world feels thin. You drive through it in the dead of night and the desert doesn't feel like desert anymore. It feels like something else, like something watching. The stars out there are too bright, too many, and the silence presses in like cotton stuffed in your ears. That's where they saw it. The Mirror. Their names were Michael and Dana. Los Angeles transplants. He worked in post-production. She managed interior design contracts. A real estate conference in Flagstaff gave them the excuse to do the kind of road trip they used to dream about back when their car was just a beater with a duct-taped mirror, and their biggest argument was whether to spend gas money or go halfsies on a six-pack. Now they had money. A rented Grand Cherokee with air conditioning that hummed like a sleeping dog. Spotify playlists. Matching Yeti water bottles. Comfort. The kind of people who'd grown too soft for the road, if you ask me. But still, they took the old Route 66 instead of the interstate, just for the pictures, the memories. The experience. It was almost midnight when they saw the Mirror. The road had been dead quiet for hours, the kind of quiet that makes even the desert seem asleep. They were somewhere west of Amboy, where the land turns flat and yellow, broken only by low scrub and the distant shadows of mountains. No lights, no signs. Just them, the night, and a long stretch of nothing. Michael was the first to see it. "There's something out there," he said, tapping the glass. Dana leaned forward. "A billboard?" "Nah, it's too narrow." They slowed. There, standing upright in the sand maybe 15 feet off the road, was a mirror. A tall, freestanding, full-length mirror like the kind you find in old department stores or the corner of a bedroom no one lives in anymore. The frame was black, ornate, looked heavy. No car tracks, no footprints, no sign of anyone or anything that had put it there. Just the mirror, perfectly vertical, perfectly still. "Pull over," Michael said. Dana gave him a look. "Why?" "I just want to look. That's how people die in movies, you know?" He gave her a little smirk, but it was nervous. "Just a second." She sighed and let the SUV roll to a stop on the gravel shoulder. Michael got out, leaving the engine running. Donna stayed in the car, eyes flicking from the mirror to her husband and back again. The desert was cool now, with a slow wind blowing across the sand like breath from something asleep. Michael approached the mirror cautiously. He kept expecting something, some reveal, some prank. Maybe a hidden camera crew waiting to laugh at the idiot walking into a trap. But there was nothing. Just silence. He got within 3 feet of it and stopped. Dana watched as he stared at his own reflection. She could see him from the car, his back straight, his hands at his sides, shoulders drawn tight. He was just staring for a long time. Then he took a step closer, and another, Then he stopped. He jerked back like he'd touched a live wire. He turned to look at the car, and even in the half-light of the SUV's running lamps, Dana saw something in his face she didn't recognize. Not fear exactly, not even shock. More like confusion, like he'd seen something he couldn't explain and was trying very hard not to believe it. He walked back briskly. Not running, but close. When he got in, he was quiet. His skin had gone. A little pale. "What did you see?" Dana asked. He shook his head. "Nothing. Just weird. My reflection was off. It's probably just some trick of the light." "What kind of off?" He didn't answer right away. Then, finally, it smiled at me. Dana stared at him. "You weren't smiling?" "No. Jesus, Mike. It also waved. I didn't move, but it waved." Dana laughed a little nervously. "You're screwing with me." He didn't laugh, didn't smile. Just looked straight ahead. "I'm tired," he said. "Let's just keep going." They drove in silence for a while. Dana checked the rear view more than once. There was nothing there. No lights, no movement. But she kept glancing back all the same. They didn't talk about the mirror again that night, but over the next few days, Dana started noticing things. Michael was different. Not dramatically. Not like he'd been body snatched or anything absurd. Just off. He didn't hum when he brushed his teeth anymore. He'd always done that. Old habit. Stupid, tuneless humming. Gone. He stopped eating with his hands. Burgers. Chips. Pizza. He'd use a knife and fork like he was at a white tablecloth bistro. Even at home, he stopped sleeping next to her. Claimed he was tossing too much. Didn't want to keep her awake. Slept on the couch with the lights off and the windows open. But the worst part was the way he looked at himself. He used to be indifferent to mirrors, shaved quick, never lingered. But now she'd catch him standing in front of the bathroom mirror late at night, just watching himself. Not doing anything. Just standing, breathing. Once she called his name. He didn't answer. She stepped closer, and for a heartbeat, she was sure, absolutely sure, his reflection turned toward her before his body did. That night, she dreamed of the desert. She saw Michael standing in front of the mirror again, but this time he stepped into it. Not like it was a reflection, like it was a doorway. His body passed through like smoke, and on the other side was something else. Something tall and thin with a face that was almost human, but too smooth. Smiling too wide. Watching her from inside the mirror, she woke up sweating. Michael was gone. She found him downstairs, sitting in the dark, whispering to the window. She couldn't make out the words. When she asked what he was doing, he looked at her with eyes that weren't quite his anymore. "I miss the quiet," he said. The next day, he called in sick to work and started removing every mirror in the house. Claimed they made him uncomfortable. Said he didn't like what he saw in them anymore. 2 nights later, she found him digging a hole in the backyard. When she asked why, he said he was trying to make it quiet again. Dana left him a week later. She tried to get him help, doctors, therapists, friends, but he refused everything, shut down. Said he didn't need help. Said he was better now. Said he'd finally seen past the glass. 3 months later, he vanished. They found the SUV abandoned off Route 66, about 10 miles past Amboy. Empty tank. Driver's door open. No sign of struggle. No sign of Michael. But out in the sand, about 20 feet off the road, someone had drawn a rectangle in the dust. 6 feet tall. Black stones lined the frame. Inside the rectangle, the sand was glass smooth. No footprints leading in or out. Dana came back once, a year later. She said she had to know if it was real. Drove the same route. Same time of night. She never found the mirror, but she swears she heard it. A low hum in the desert wind. And her reflection, just for a second in the side view mirror, smiled back at her. Highway 17's a winding black vein through the redwoods, an artery carved into the ribs of the Santa Cruz Mountains. It rises and falls like the chest of something sleeping and old too old, maybe for names and too big for God. Locals call it Blood Alley for good reason. Every month or so, someone ends up wrapped around a tree or folded beneath a semi. Fog coils through those switchbacks at night, thick and white like smoke from a dying fire. And if you drive it long enough, especially after midnight, you start to see things. Or think you do. I was coming back from San Jose, heading south toward Santa Cruz. It was late pushing, 12:30, and I just left a double shift at the hospital. My eyes were hot and dry, stinging like sandpaper behind my lids. I rolled down the window to let in the cold air, trying to keep myself from drifting off. There's no mercy on 17. The road doesn't care how tired you are. One blink too long, and you're part of the concrete. I was about 5 miles past Lexington Reservoir, somewhere around Laurel Curve, when I saw her. She stood on the shoulder, her arms hugging her sides, blonde hair tucked into the hood of a white sweatshirt. The hoodie was spotless, almost glowing in the headlights, like she didn't belong in the world with the dirt and grime. She didn't wave or step into the road, just stood there. I slowed without really thinking. Something about her made my gut twist, but I couldn't leave her there. It gets cold up in the pass at night. People freeze. Bears still roam in those hills sometimes. Or worse, people do. I stopped just ahead of her. The dome light flicked on as I reached across and popped the lock. She opened the passenger door without a word and slid in. She didn't smell like the road. No sweat, no pine, no smoke. Just cold like she'd been pulled from a meat locker. Her hands stayed folded in her lap, motionless. She didn't say a thing. Not even a thanks. We drove in silence for maybe a mile. She stared straight ahead, her face turned toward the windshield, not the side window like you'd expect. Her eyes never blinked. I was about to ask if she needed to go to town or the hospital when she whispered, barely louder than the hum of the tires, "He's coming." I turned to her, confused. What? But she was gone, just like that. Gone. Door still locked, seatbelt still buckled. I watched it retract slowly, curling like a snake into the seat. My hand trembled on the wheel. I almost veered into the median dot, and then the headlights behind me flared. How fast and flared. Second car, some beat-up Ford sedan, was tailing me now, way too close, swerving like the driver couldn't see straight. I checked my rear view and caught just a glimpse of the guy's face, pale, wide-eyed, mouth open like he was screaming. He jerked the wheel and shot to the right, clipping the guardrail. I watched, helpless, as the car fishtailed, slammed into a redwood, and disappeared in a bloom of sparks and glass. I pulled over, heart punching my ribs, and ran back up the road, but it was too late. The Ford was half crushed against the tree. Smoke billowed from the hood, mixing with the fog like breath. The driver's head had gone through the windshield. He was already gone. His eyes, still open, looked like they were staring at something just beyond the tree line. Not afraid, not panicked, just watching. Police came quick. CHP's got that stretch of highway on constant watch. They took my statement, asked the usual questions. I told them about the girl, about what she said, about how she vanished. The officer, an older guy, with liver spots on his hands and a weariness that went deeper than the job, nodded once. Didn't ask me to repeat it. Didn't scoff. You said she was wearing white? He asked. I nodded. He sighed and glanced down the road toward the curve. That was Dead Man's Curve. You know the story? I shook my head. He looked back at me, eyes dull and flat. 1962. High school girl named Emily Dorrance. Prom night. Her boyfriend got drunk, ran them off the road. He walked away with a broken arm. She wasn't so lucky. They didn't find her for 3 days. When they did, she was still in the passenger seat, still wearing her corsage, neck snapped. But the weird part? The seatbelt was still buckled. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Folks say she shows up when something bad's about to happen. Sometimes in her prom dress. Lately, it's the hoodie. No one knows why. Maybe she's changing with the times. He almost smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're not the first to see her, they towed the wreck. I drove home on shaking legs. I didn't sleep that night. 2 weeks passed. I told myself I'd imagined it. Lack of sleep. PTSD from the hospital. Stress. But then I saw her again. Same stretch, same curve, same white hoodie. She stepped into the road this time, forcing me to brake so hard the tires screamed. I stopped inches from her. My chest thudded like a sledgehammer. She stared through the windshield, unblinking. Then she walked slowly around to the passenger side and opened the door. I didn't stop her. She sat down, buckled the belt. The cabin filled with that same cold. Her eyes never left the windshield. This time I didn't speak. I didn't ask anything. After about a mile, she whispered, "He's closer now." I turned my head. She was gone again. This time no car followed. No crash. Just silence and the weight of something unseen pressing down on my shoulders. I started digging. Found old newspaper clippings. Dozens of them. Accidents stretching back 50 years. All in the same quarter mile. All at night. More than a few of the survivors mentioned a girl in white. Most didn't make it to tell the story. Then I found something worse. There was another name. A man named Everett Reed. The killer from 1984. Hitchhiker turned murderer. Picked up by a trucker outside of Scotts Valley. The trucker ended up in pieces, spread along the roadside like roadkill. Everett was caught a week later, covered in blood and mumbling about the girl who warned him. The one in white. He said she told him something too. She said I was the one. After he died in prison, the sightings increased. Some said she was trying to stop him. Others claimed she brought him there. I started avoiding 17 at night. Took the long way around through Watsonville, even if it meant an extra hour. I didn't care, but the dream started anyway, always the same. I'm driving. The road's empty. No signs, no lights. Just forest and fog. Then she's beside me, pale, quiet, and she turns, slowly, as if it hurts, and says, "He's almost here." I wake up soaked in sweat, breath ragged, and my ears filled with the sound of screaming brakes. Last night, I couldn't avoid the highway. Emergency at the hospital. I had to go. Fog was thick. The kind you feel in your lungs. She was already there. Standing in the middle of the road this time, I didn't stop. Drove right through, but my car never made it home. They found it the next morning, engine running, lights on, door locked. Seatbelt buckled. Empty. North of Sacramento, past the gated communities and the strip malls, where Highway 50 thins out and the land begins to shrug off civilization like a snake shedding its skin, there's a turnout few people notice anymore. Locals drive past it without a second glance, and the newcomers, the suburban families with clean SUVs and HOA lawn signs, don't even know it's there. But if you take that gravel turnout just before El Dorado Hills, your tires crackling over old rockin' beer cans, you'll find a slope leading down into a dip in the land where the trees grow older, thicker, darker. And in the center of that dip, alone like it was banished, stands the tree. They call it the widow. It's a live oak, twisted and massive, with limbs that hang like broken arms and bark blackened like it's been charred. The locals don't like to talk about it much, but if you find one old enough or drunk enough, they'll tell you that in 1853, A miner named Silas Harrow came home early from the claim and found his wife in bed with a man he didn't recognize. He killed them both with a pickaxe, dragged their bodies to that tree, and then hanged himself from one of its thick limbs. They say the tree didn't rot like it should have. They say the ground around it stopped taking root. Grass grows in patches, but only weeds flourish close to the trunk. A few brave kids tried carving their initials into it in the 80s, but their marks vanished within days, the bark sealing up like flesh. One kid said the tree bled on him. Most chalk it up to stories. Just the usual rural superstition, but not. Everyone. The Ramsey family was passing through on their way from Oregon to visit relatives in Fresno. Jake and Eliza had packed up their little Toyota Highlander and left Portland with their 3-year-old daughter. Molly, strapped in her car seat, her pink bunny clutched against her chest. It was supposed to be a long trip, but easy. Podcasts, gas, stations, fast food, family memories. They didn't plan on stopping near El Dorado Hills. It was Molly who pointed. Just after noon, somewhere around the exit for Salmon Falls Road, she started crying. Not tantrum crying, but something deeper. Shaking like she was cold. When Eliza turned in her seat and asked what was wrong, Molly simply said, "The red tree is crying." Jake slowed, confused. There was no tree on the highway, just a glimpse of forest beyond the railing. But Molly kept pointing, her little hand insistent. "There," she whispered. "It's sad." Against his better judgment, Jake pulled over onto the turnout and followed the gravel path downward. The family got out. Dust rose around their feet. The sun was out, the sky dry and bleached. Not a cloud in sight. No breeze either, yet the leaves in the grove rustled faintly, like breath. And then they saw it, the tree, massive, alone. Its bark was dark and strangely wet, as though it had rained only on that single patch of forest. Eliza was the first to approach. She crouched near the trunk and reached out. Molly stayed in Jake's arms, silent now, eyes wide. Eliza touched the bark with her fingers and jerked her hand back so fast she nearly fell. "It's blood," she whispered. "It's wet." "It's not sap, Jake. It's..." Then she started crying. Not like Molly, not hysterics. Just a single, shuddering sob, like something had been taken from deep inside her. Jake touched her shoulder, and she looked at him like she didn't recognize his face. Then she said, "It whispered to me." "What?" it said. Her voice cracked. It said, "You'll leave someone behind." They didn't speak much after that. Back in the car, Eliza was pale and quiet. She stared at her hand like it still hurt. Molly had gone to sleep, her bunny tucked against her cheek. Jake just drove. That night, at a Motel 6 in Bakersfield, Eliza locked herself in the bathroom for over an hour. When Jake finally got her to come out, she kept looking at the mirror, saying she'd seen herself hanged. Just for a second. Just in the reflection. A week later, on a sun-blasted stretch of I-5, the Toyota blew a tire. Witnesses said the vehicle flipped 3 times before, skidding to a stop in the dirt off the shoulder. The police report noted that everyone had been wearing seat belts, everyone except Eliza. They found her body 50 feet from the wreck, limp and shattered beneath a lone oak tree at the edge of a fallow field. There was no blood at the base of the tree, but the bark had turned red again. The paramedics were the first to say it. Whispered, of course, that the tree seemed wrong, that it creaked when there was no wind, that the birds didn't land near it. One said the bark was whispering. Another claimed he saw it move, just slightly, like it had taken a breath. After the funeral, Jake tried to go on. He moved in with his sister in Redding. Molly didn't talk much anymore, just stared at her drawings. Trees, mostly. Red trees with crying faces in the bark. Sometimes the trees had people hanging from them. Jake tried to throw them out, but new ones always appeared. Drawn in crayon, tucked under her pillow, he finally went back. One night, after putting Molly to bed, he drove south. It was late October by then, and the winds were coming down from the mountains. He followed the same route, exited the same turnout, walked the same cracked trail through the same dead grass. The tree was still there, still alone, still weeping. Jake walked up to it and ran his hand over the bark dot. It was warm dot, and then it whispered, not like a sound, but a thought placed in the center of his skull. "You brought her here." He staggered back. He didn't remember running, but he found himself in the car, driving north, his palms wet on the wheel. That night, Molly woke up screaming. Jake ran into her room, but she wasn't in bed. The window was open, the screen torn. Her drawings were scattered across the floor. All of them were red now, not just the trees, the sky, the grass. Her little bunny soaked in crimson crayon. And on one of the pictures, in a shaky scrawl, "I'm going where Mommy went." Jake never found her. The police searched, of course. Amber alerts, roadblocks, choppers. Nothing. No sign of forced entry. No signs of a struggle. Only the open window, the trail of tiny footprints in the backyard, dirt leading into the trees. Jake told them about the widow, about the tree, the blood, the whisper. They nodded politely, took notes, then labeled him unstable. He was evaluated, medicated, spent time in a facility in Sacramento for a few months. By the time he got out, the trail had gone cold. Jake now lives out of his truck. Sometimes you'll find him at gas stations along 50 or I-5 asking strangers if they've seen a little girl with a pink bunny. Sometimes he talks to trees. Sometimes he screams at them. And sometimes, when the moon is high, truckers swear they see him parked at the El Dorado turnout, sitting beneath that ancient oak, bleeding from his palms, whispering back. Locals say, the tree is growing again, taller, stronger. They say the red streaks on its bark don't fade anymore. And sometimes, just sometimes, kids riding in the back seats of passing cars will look out toward the grove and say, "Mommy, why is that? Tree crying?" The fog rolled in thick that night, heavy and bloated with ocean breath, blanketing the coastline like wet wool. It pulled around the rocks and swallowed the pines along Highway 1 in slow, creeping waves. Everything went quiet when it came in. No crickets, no gulls, just the distant boom of surf crashing against the cliff base and the whisper of tires on damp pavement. Sam Taggart gripped the steering wheel a little tighter as the silver SUV rounded the bend south of Carmel and approached Bixby Creek Bridge ghost white in the mist, lit only by the faint amber glow of his headlights and the single blinking taillight of a Harley that had vanished into the dark a minute earlier. He hated driving at night, especially up here, where the cliffs dropped like knives and the guardrails looked more like hopeful suggestions than any real protection. But he'd stayed too long at the bar in Big Sur, just a couple beers, some talk with that Australian girl and her weird stories about the sea swallowing people whole. His phone was dead. His charger had somehow ended up under the passenger seat. And now, just past midnight, he was driving blind through one of the most notoriously treacherous stretches of road in California, and yet, Bixby Bridge had a beauty to it. Even now, in the soup-thick fog, it looked unreal, like it floated. A sheer concrete arch that seemed less built than dreamed. The kind of place you'd see in a dream right before the dream went bad. He slowed. As he reached the middle of the bridge, he didn't know why, maybe to get a better look, maybe because he felt the sudden weight of the air change. The SUV drifted to a crawl. Wind slid through the cracks in the window like cold fingers. Was when he heard it. "Jump, you'll float." The voice was barely louder than breath. but it came clear as glass from the passenger seat. Right beside him, Sam's heart stopped mid-beat. His foot slammed the brake. The car squealed and skidded, tires biting slick pavement before lurching. To a halt, he sat still for a long time, eyes fixed forward, lungs refusing to draw in anything but panic. The voice hadn't been his own. It hadn't been a thought. It had spoken, low, feminine, almost bored, like she was suggesting a detour. He turned his head. Slowly. The seat beside him was empty, but the seatbelt was fastened. Strapped tight across an invisible figure, the latch clipped in. He stared at it. Mouth dry. That seatbelt had not been fastened. He would have noticed. He always kept that seat clear for his board, which he'd left at a friend's house in town. No bags, no gear, no one else. And yet, the buckle glinted in the dim light from the dashboard like it had always been there, holding someone in place. A long moment passed. Then, against every voice of reason screaming inside him, he reached over and touched the belt. Warm. He yanked his hand back like he touched a stove. A dry breath of air passed through the cab, even though the windows were sealed shut. It smelled like salt. And something else, something musty, like seaweed rotting in the sun, like depth. Like the underside of the ocean, where sunlight never reached. Sam floored it. The SUV roared forward, tires biting pavement, engine growling like an animal let loose. The bridge vanished behind him in the rearview in seconds, swallowed whole by fog. He didn't stop until he hit Pfeiffer Ridge, where a patch of light and the yellow glow of the lodge parking lot gave him a place to breathe. He sat in the car for 10 minutes, shaking. Then he reached over and unbuckled the passenger seat belt. It clicked open all on its own. He never crossed Bixby Bridge again. Not during the day, not at night. He'd rather take the long way around than risk hearing that voice again. But the thing is, he wasn't the only one. That voice has been heard by at least 7 others in the last 20 years. Locals mostly. People who know better than to talk about it publicly. A couple of them swore they were the only ones in the car. One girl, Kayla Stenson, a hiker from Carmel Highlands, said she stopped to take a photo of the moon from the bridge's shoulder. She parked, leaned out, phone in hand, and heard someone murmur right in her ear, "Jump, you'll float." Like driftwood. She turned around. No one there. When she looked back, the moon had vanished behind a sudden bank of fog, and her car keys were gone. Later, they were found wedged under the passenger seat beneath a bone-dry glove compartment that reeked of brine and mildew. She told a park ranger the story. He told her not to tell anyone else. Not unless she wanted people thinking she was cracked. And then there was Curtis Dorr, a long-haul trucker from King City, who said the radio in his rig went dead as he crossed the bridge around 2 a.m. in early April, just static. Then a low whisper through the speakers, "Jump, you'll float. It's so warm down here." He thought it was a prank CB hackers or some new kind of weird interference, but when he looked over, the glove box was open, and something inside it was dripping. He swerved and nearly went over the edge. Didn't report it until a year later. Said he still dreams about it. A woman's voice, coming from inside his own head now, telling him he missed his chance. The bridge has a history, of course. Like anything that's been around long enough in this part of California. Built in the early 1930s, one of the tallest single-span concrete bridges in the world when it opened. A feat of engineering. But a lot of workers died during construction. One man, according to rumor, fell into the canyon below and was never recovered. They say his body was swept into the sea, dragged under the rocks where the creek spills out. But that's not the real story. The real story is older. Way older. The Rumsen people, who lived in these parts long before any highways or tourists, called the area Ezelen Wekino, the place where the sea takes voice. There are stories passed down if you can find the right elder to tell them. Tales of women who walked into the surf on fog-heavy nights and never came back. Of voices in the tide. Of a mouth in the water. One version goes like this. A woman was cursed by the sea spirits for breaking a taboo. Some say she tried to steal the name of the ocean god. Others say she drowned her child in a tide pool to escape a jealous lover. Whatever the reason, she was taken into the deep, but not before her voice was taken from her. Now she can only whisper through places where the sea touches the land. Places like Bixby Creek Bridge. They say she waits for people to come alone, especially those thinking dark thoughts. She can smell it on them. Grief, regret, guilt, all of it like blood in the water. She doesn't push them, doesn't scream or plead. She just whispers, "Jump, you'll float." And some do. The records don't show many suicides at Bixby. That's what makes it worse. If the number were high, people would take notice. But there are whispers, cars found idling with doors open, phones left behind on the guardrail, backpacks in the passenger seat, zip tight, buckled in like they were never meant to leave. The fog helps. It hides the plunge. The ocean keeps what it wants. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, you can hear her, not through the radio, not from the passenger seat, but from the water beneath the bridge, so far below that no voice should reach. And yet, it does. Always the same thing. Jump. Float. It started out like one of those laid-back, half-planned ideas that seem smart when you're sitting in a dorm room with too much caffeine and not enough homework done. Caleb was the one who brought it up. Said he knew a place off Angeles Crest Highway where the sky opened up and the stars didn't get drowned by the city's neon breath. "It's perfect," he said, eyes wide with that kind of confidence that only comes from never having seen anything real. Nobody goes there. Too high up, too cold at night. But the view, man, worth it. Eli wasn't so sure. He'd grown up outside of Corpus Christi in a house where his grandma salted the windows and muttered things in Spanish whenever the wind picked up weird. He believed in things. Not ghosts, not demons exactly, but something about the in-between those. Hours where the world didn't quite know whether it was night or morning. But Caleb was his roommate, and after 2 years of brushing up against his bright-eyed madness, Ellie had learned it was easier to just say, sure, and go along with it. They packed light. A small dome tent, sleeping bags, a cooler with beer, and gas station sandwiches, a flashlight each, and one of those portable fire pits Caleb had bought secondhand. He was all about leave no trace. Even though Eli always joked that, Caleb left nothing but bad vibes wherever he went. It was already late afternoon when they reached the turnout off the highway. The drive had taken longer than expected. Angeles Crest was steep and winding, with too many blind corners and sudden fog that clung to the windshield like old breath. But when they parked and hiked down the dirt path to a shallow clearing tucked into the trees, it really did seem perfect. Pines towered around them like dark spires, and the view west showed a slice of the valley bleeding orange and pink under the dying sun. No noise but the occasional rustle of wind high above, and something distant like the sound of gravel shifting under unseen boots. But that could have been the mountain settling. They set up camp, drank a couple of beers, and waited for the stars. Caleb was the first to light the fire. He crouched near the pit and clicked the lighter under the pine wood bundle he'd stacked carefully. But the fire didn't start like it should have. It hissed, almost gasped, then ignited in a thin stream, an odd little reverse tongue of flame that flicked downward into the logs. Not from the base up, like fire normally behaves, but starting from the top and retreating slowly into the wood as if being pulled inward. Like the logs were inhaling it. Eli leaned in. That single quotes right. Caleb just laughed, shaking. The lighter again. Maybe it's possessed. Some ghost of Smokey the Bear, pissed off we brought shitty pine wood. But the fire kept burning. Wrongly. It didn't glow, not really. More like it throbbed, dim and reddish, with little blue edges. That pulsed like veins. The shadows it threw weren't smooth and dancing like a normal campfire. They twitched. Snapped back and forth like something nervous was hiding in them. And it was cold. Cold fire. Eli could sit a foot from it and feel nothing. No heat. No. Warmth. If anything, the air felt colder around it. That made no sense. He said so. Caleb took a swig of beer. You want me to build another one? Maybe this wood's just weird. But they didn't rebuild it. They stared at it. Long enough that the stars blinked fully into the sky and the moon rose behind the trees, bright enough to outline everything. In a silver film. Long enough that the fire started to stink. Not wood smoke. Not even the acrid bite of burning plastic. Something else. Burning hair. Eli caught it first. His grandma used to burn chicken feathers on the stovetop to tell fortunes, a strange ritual he never quite understood but always hated. That smell, it was the same. Bitter, oily, a kind of death that clung to the inside of your throat. Caleb, he said, rising to his feet. What the hell is that? Caleb sniffed, his nose wrinkled. Jesus, that's foul. What, did a rat crawl into the woodpile? But Eli had already stepped back, eyes scanning the tree line. There was movement. Not loud, subtle, like something. Brushing against bark. Low to the ground, pacing. Not coming closer, but circling. Caleb didn't hear it at first, but when he finally turned his head, his smile faltered. Did you hear that? Yeah, maybe it's a coyote. Coyotes don't make fire cold. They didn't say much after that. The night thickened around them, and the cold got worse. The fire didn't die, but it didn't live either. It just sat there, flickering upside down, burning without burning. At some point, they retreated into the tent. Zipped it up tight. Caleb cracked a joke about possession again, but this time his voice didn't carry the same cheer. They lay there, not quite sleeping. The cold was sharp, unnatural. Eli kept listening. The footsteps, if that's what they were, never came close. But they didn't leave either. They circled, slow, deliberate. Once, maybe around 3 a.m, he heard something scratch. Not the tent. Not wood. Earth. Like claws raking the dirt outside. 3 times. Then silence. He didn't say anything. Neither did Caleb. In the morning, the world looked normal. Bright sunlight, birds chirping, the usual aftermath of a cold mountain night. Except for the fire pit. The logs were untouched, not charred. Just gone pale, as if all the color had been drained out. But more than that, around the tent, in a perfect ring, were claw marks. Burned into the earth, not dug. Not scratched. Scorched. The kind of marks you'd expect from a branding iron being dragged through dry soil. 3 claws. Evenly spaced. Deep. No footprints. No paw prints. No drag marks. Just that ring. Like something had paced around their tent all night, pressing its heatless fire into the dirt. Caleb didn't speak for a long time. He just stared, pale and silent. They packed up fast. Didn't even bother with breakfast. Left the fire pit as it was. When they got back to the car, the hood was warm. Too warm for a vehicle that hadn't been turned on since the previous afternoon. They didn't talk about it for days. Caleb started skipping classes. He stopped laughing so much. Started keeping the dorm window locked even during heat waves. Eli dreamed of the fire, not in color, not in sound, but in feeling. Cold crawling over him like frostbite. And always, just, before waking, a shadow at the edge of the dream. A long shape, crouched, watching him. He couldn't see the eyes, but he felt them. And when he woke up always at the exact same time, 3:30 a.m., his room would be cold, freezing, like something had just left. Eventually, he tried to go back. A year later, alone, some part of him needed to know. Needed to see if it had been real. He drove the highway in silence. The turnout was still there. The path still led to the clearing. But when he stepped into the space where the fire had been, he froze. The claw marks were still there, not faded. Not worn by time. Fresh. Still black. Still hot to the touch. And in the center, where the fire had burned backwards that night, was a circle of pale, dust-colored ash. He never told Caleb he went back, because that night, back in the dorm, Caleb jumped out of the window. No note, no warning, just gone. And Eli, he kept waking up at 3:13. He keeps his window nailed shut now. Doesn't light candles. Doesn't touch lighters. He hasn't seen fire since that night, because he knows now some things don't burn like they should. Some things burn backwards. In 1978, Pasadena, Texas wasn't the kind of town people wrote about. It was ordinary in the worst way, flat, humid, always under construction, with highways carved through fields like scars, gas stations that never closed, and a sky that was more yellow than blue most days. Prospect Tunnel wasn't much to look at either, even before they filled it in. Just a long, concrete scar running beneath the rail line west of Beltway 8. It was built during the 40s for drainage and service. Vehicles, maybe to keep the road from flooding during hurricane season. But no one used it anymore by the late 70s. Kids did, though. That was the mistake. David Langford was 12 years old the last time anyone saw him. Blonde hair, big ears, rode his bike like it was an extension of his body. He left the house. Around 3 p.m. on September 2nd, said he was riding to his friend's place a couple neighborhoods over. His mother reminded him to be back by 6 for dinner. He never made it. They found the bike that night leaning on a cracked post just outside Prospect Tunnel. The kickstand was down. No scratches, no sign of a struggle. Like he'd just stopped riding, gotten off, and vanished. Cops searched the area for days. The tunnel was combed, scraped, drained, even x-rayed. No signs of David. No blood, no clothes, no body. After 2 weeks, it was a missing persons case. After 2 months, it was a cold case. By 85, they filled in the tunnel, entirely sealed both ends with reinforced concrete, then leveled it when the rail line above was retired. They cut through the land, paved it over, and by 1990, no one even remembered there had ever been a tunnel except for the families and the ones who had seen things. Decades passed. Pasadena grew like a tumor. More subdivisions, more big box stores, more sterile office parks, and plastic-looking schools. By 2019, even the locals had trouble remembering what used to be where. Prospect Tunnel lived on in whispers, in old folk stories and grainy black and white photos buried in library basements. But it came back one night. Just once. It was 2:23 in the morning when Mark and Jenna Ulrich passed through the industrial zone off Red Bluff Road. They'd been visiting her sister in Baytown and got a late start heading home. The roads were empty. Steam rose from storm drains, and the air had that Gulf Coast thickness to it, like breathing through wet towels. Mark fiddled with the radio, frustrated by static and weak country stations. Jenna was half asleep, head lolling against the window, when she gasped, "There, did you see that?" Mark hit the brakes, hard enough that the seatbelt caught her shoulder. "What?" he said. "A kid," Jenna said, blinking. "A kid on a bike. Just rode across the road." Mark looked out. Nothing. Just chain link fences, cracked pavement, Oil tanks in the distance. There's no kid out here, he muttered, but his voice was quieter than it should have been. They waited. Just as he was about to hit the gas, they both saw it about 20 yards ahead, a pale figure, head down, pedaling slowly across the road into the brush. The light from the car caught a flash of rusted chrome, long sleeves from a hoodie, white sneakers barely scuffed. No way. Mark whispered. No way a kid's out here at this hour. Without thinking, he turned the wheel and followed. They rolled forward slowly, headlights sweeping the overgrown lot. There wasn't much left, just old concrete footings, maybe from a pump station, or an old warehouse long demolished. And then they saw it dot an opening, low, wide, blacker than the space around it, about 8 feet tall, maybe 10 wide. Just there, a tunnel, concrete lined with a rusted city drainage grate lying bent beside it. The boy had gone into it. They stopped the car. Mark reached for the flashlight in the glove box. What are you doing? Jenna asked, voice shaking. I just want to see just for a second. He stepped out. The smell hit first like rot, wet metal, and old fire. A heat shimmer came off the tunnel mouth like there was something burning deep inside. But no light, just pure black. He raised the flashlight and then the light. Dimmed not flickered. Dimmed, like something was pulling at the beam, drawing it inward. He stepped back then they heard it. A squeak metal on metal. The sound of a bike wheel turning. Slowly then it stopped, and a voice, flat and boyish from the dark. You saw me. Mark's knees nearly gave out. He turned and ran. Got in the car. Slammed the door. Jenna was white as a sheet. Drive, she whispered. He did. As fast as he could. When they hit the highway, the tunnel was gone. They even turned around after. A mile, thinking they'd imagined it. Nothing. Just flat gravel and weeds. No opening, no concrete, no boy. They got home. Didn't sleep. Not a word between them. The next morning, Mark checked the tires before going to work. There was something wrong. The rear tires were caked in dry mud where there should have been asphalt all night. And through the dirt, clearly etched, were tracks, small tire tracks. Like from a child's bike, they led from the rear axle out. Behind the car, like something had followed them or ridden with them. The marks weren't from their car. They weren't from any road they'd driven on. They were new, impossibly narrow. And they stopped dead, halfway down the driveway, like whoever made them had just vanished. Mark never told the police. Jenna wouldn't talk about it again. He didn't blame her, but he started reading newspapers, old forums, strange corners of the internet. He pulled blueprints from the Pasadena Public Works archives. And he found it. Prospect Tunnel, closed in 1985, filled and erased, but something stayed. David Langford's file was still open. Technically, no body, no resolution. Mark started seeing things after that. A blur in the rearview mirror. Faint scratching on the garage door. At night, when the house settled and creaked like old bones, he swore he heard rubber wheels spinning on linoleum. One night he woke to find bike tire tracks in the hallway. Carpet. He sold the house 3 months later. In a motel off Highway 225. He left a note for Jenna. Didn't say where he was going. Just that he was going to try and find it again. He never came back. His car was found parked near the old tank farms, locked, keys still inside. The last thing anyone saw of him was caught on a cracked security camera across the lot. Just a few frames of a man in a hoodie walking slowly toward a stretch of concrete that didn't lead anywhere. But in one frame, just one, there's something behind him. A bike. Rusted. And someone riding it. Close behind. Too close. Much too close. Driving north on Highway 395, just past the faint border where Southern California starts to shrug off its desert heat and the eastern Sierra foothills rise like ribs from the earth, Mark Emery had the road to himself. It was late September, the tail end of tourist season, and most travelers had already filtered through Mammoth Lakes or moved on toward Reno or Tahoe. The wind was dry, full of dust and the faint smell of pine, and the two-lane highway unspooled. Before him, like a thread unraveling into the wilderness, Mark was heading to an old friend's cabin near Crowley Lake. A few days of solitude. He figured fishing, a bottle of rye, and no goddamn cell service. He was a contractor from Ventura, recently divorced, pushing 50 and starting to feel it in the knees. He liked the silence, or he thought he did. The road was balm to him, a long stretch of nowhere bordered by the kind of land that didn't give a damn if you lived or died. It was a little past 7 p.m., and the sky was starting to smear into bands of orange and purple when he saw it, just a flicker at first, like a shadow moving where no shadow should be. A dog, sitting right at the edge of the asphalt. Not lying down, not pacing or sniffing, sitting, still as a statue. Mark slowed the truck out of instinct. He kept a small cooler on the passenger seat with beef jerky and some leftover fried chicken he'd picked up in Mojave. The dog looked thin, ribs showing even in the fading light. It was a mutt part shepherd, part husky maybe. Dirty tan coat matted with dust. He pulled onto the gravel shoulder and stepped out, chicken in hand. "Hey boy," he said softly. The dog didn't move, didn't bark. It looked at him. And Mark felt something cold slip under his skin. Not fear, not yet, just confusion, because those weren't dog's eyes. They were brown, human brown, not that glossy, flat kind of animal stare, but deep and moist and intelligent, like a man's eyes staring out through a mask. The pupils didn't dilate like they should. They focused, studied. And then it smiled, not with its mouth. Its lips didn't move, no teeth bared, no panting tongue. But the eyes smiled, creased at the corners, glinted with humor. Mockery. Mark froze. The chicken trembled in his hand. "What the hell?" he murmured. The dog tilted its head just a little, still smiling with those eyes. That was when Mark backed away, slowly. He dropped the chicken on the gravel and climbed back into the truck. He didn't slam the door or floor it. Something told him not to provoke. He simply turned the key and eased back onto the highway, heart pounding, watching the rearview mirror until the dog disappeared into the dusk. He didn't see it move. It was just gone. About 30 miles later, just past Tom's place, the truck shuddered and lost power. Engine coughed, lights flickered. The steering went stiff as iron. Mark cursed and wrestled the vehicle to the side of the road. Steam hissed from under the hood. "Are you kidding me?" He popped the hood, but Mark wasn't much of a mechanic. Radiator hose was blown, or maybe the water pump. Either way, he wasn't going anywhere tonight. His cell showed no signal, of course. Night crept in fast. The air cooled sharply, and the wind picked up off the mountain ridges like a whisper turning into breath. He stood by the truck, arms crossed, trying to decide whether to sleep in the cab or start walking toward the nearest gas station in the morning. That was when he saw it again, up on the ridge across the road. The dog, sitting perfectly still on a rocky outcrop just beyond the reach of his headlights. Watching. The silhouette was unmistakable. But what froze Mark's spine was the reflection, those eyes. Not animal shine from tapetum lucidum, this was something else. The kind of glint you'd get from a pair of binoculars in the sunlight. Focused. Alive. It sat there for an hour. Didn't move. Mark slept in the cab, fitfully, with the doors locked and a tire iron on his lap. When he woke with the sunrise, the ridge was empty. He got the truck towed to Bishop later that morning. The mechanic, a Navajo guy named Aaron, took one look and said, "Looks like you overheated for a while before it gave out." Lucky it didn't catch fire. Mark didn't mention the dog. He didn't even tell the story when he reached the cabin, though it sat heavy on his mind, but the dog kept showing up first on a trail behind the cabin 2 days later. Mark had been hiking with a spinning rod, hoping to cast a few lines into Rock Creek. The woods were quiet, too quiet, like everything was holding its breath. Then, there it was sitting among the boulders. Same eyes, same expression. Mark backed away. Hiked the long way home. He started seeing it more often, sometimes near the gas station, once near the general store in Mammoth. Always alone. Always watching, never moving. Then things got worse. He'd hear scratching outside the cabin. At night, the screen door once ripped clean off its hinges. No tracks, no signs of animal damage, just torn metal and the faint odor of something not quite wild. He found paw prints on the back deck one morning, but they weren't normal. Each toe was long. Too long, like stretched fingers, and in the center of the pad, a spiral mark pressed deep, almost burned into the wood. The locals didn't talk much when he asked. One old man behind the counter at Shat's Bakery finally offered something after Mark described the dog. "You saw him, huh?" The man said, not looking up from his register. "Highway dog. Been around since the 50s, some say longer. Not real, not like you and me. What is it?" Mark asked. The man finally looked up. His eyes were cloudy with age, but dead serious. Not what? Who? That night, Mark drank too much whiskey. He sat on the porch until the stars blurred, and sure enough, at 2:13 a.m., the dog appeared at the edge of the clearing. It walked on all fours, but its gait was wrong. Too smooth. Joints bending oddly. It didn't bark. It just stood there. Then took a step forward. And another. Mark raised the tire iron. But his arm felt weak, useless. His legs were heavy. The dog stopped 10 feet away, its head cocked. And then it spoke, not out loud, not with lips or throat, inside his skull. A whisper, not in English, but something deeper. Felt like feeling more than sound. Like sadness, hunger, rage all layered into one. He saw things in that moment. A crash. A boy dying on the highway in 1957, blood pooling on the pavement. A dog running to him. Sitting beside his body until the lights came. A deal made. Or maybe a curse. Or maybe the highway just took them both. Now it wandered. Watched. Waited. That smile deepened. Then it turned and vanished into the trees. Mark left the cabin the next morning. Never went back. He moved east, far from the Sierras, far from 395. But sometimes, on quiet nights, he'll look out his window and swear he sees a shape sitting under the street lamp. A dog, still, silent, smiling. They'd left Modesto a little after 9, late by any measure, and that was part of the charm. Mike liked the open road when it was empty, when the heat had bled out of the day and the only lights came from the occasional rig thundering past, or the amber dots lining the shoulder like dying stars. Jack didn't say much at first. He just rested his arm against the window and watched the dark orchard slide by in neat rows. The warm air rolled in through the cracked windows because the AC didn't work anymore, and neither did the radio. Hadn't for months. Mike had bought the car used from some guy in Stockton who swore it only had 100,000 miles on it, but even Jack knew that was a lie. The seats were sun-bleached and cracked, the dashboard warped. One of the doors rattled when they went over 60. It had character, sure, but it also had issues. Jack had fiddled with the radio more than once on past trips, hoping it would randomly start working again, but it never did. Static, if anything. Usually silence. Tonight, They were halfway between Turlock and Merst when the thing spoke. Not music, not static. A voice, clear, calm, male, soft, westbound. 2 vehicles. Head-on collision. Fatal. Mile marker 147. Mike's hands twitched on the wheel, and he glanced at Jack like he'd heard it too. "Did you?" Jack leaned forward, stared at the glowing green numbers on the dash. 10:17 p.m.? The hell was that? Mike reached for the dial instinctively, then pulled his hand back. The screen was dark. The knobs didn't respond. It had come on by itself and shut off just as quickly. They didn't say much after that, but the air inside the car felt different, heavier. Jack kept his eyes on the side of the road, counting off the markers, though they were hard to see. In the dark, 128, 1-30-6, 1-40-2. Then, at 147, just like the voice had said, they saw it. A pickup had slammed head-on into a sedan. The sedan's front end was folded like a cheap suitcase, windshield gone, steam pouring from the hood like breath in cold air. The truck had skidded sideways and was half in the dirt, one tire still spinning lazily. No sirens yet. No flashing lights. Just silence and the mangled wrecks glinting in their headlights as they passed. "Jesus," Jack whispered. Mike eased off the gas and flicked the blinker. "We should stop." But before he could pull over, the radio hissed again. "Don't stop." That was it. A whisper behind the voice, more forceful. Urgent. Mike froze, hand hovering near the wheel. The blinker kept ticking, loud and unnatural in the sudden quiet. Jack's mouth was open, but he didn't say anything. He didn't have to. They kept driving. Neither looked in the mirrors. The road seemed longer after that, empty, oppressive. The kind of road that felt like it stretched forever, even though Bakersfield wasn't more than an hour away. Jack turned around a couple times to look back, but the night swallowed the wreck quickly. No red and blue lights. No help, just black. Behind them and black ahead. They didn't talk again until they reached the outskirts of Bakersfield. Strip malls, gas stations, blinking motel signs, civilization. But even then, the lights looked wrong, off color, dimmer than they should have been. They crashed at Mike's cousin's place near White Lane, but neither of them slept, not really. Jack lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, watching the shadows at Cass shift and warp with each slow rotation. He could still hear the voice. It didn't sound like it had come from the speakers, not exactly. More like it had spoken directly into his head. The next morning, he checked the news. Nothing. No mention of a crash at 147. No road closures. No fatalities reported. He dug deeper. Searched the CHP traffic logs. Nothing. Mike didn't want to talk about it, but when Jack brought it up, he didn't deny it either. Just shrugged and said, "We saw what we saw." Jack couldn't let it go. The next day, he made up an excuse to borrow the car and took it out onto 99 again. Not all the way to Modesto. Just far enough. The radio was dead. He flicked the knob. Pressed the buttons. Even tried smacking the dash. Nothing. Not even static. It was like the thing had never worked at all. Like he'd imagined the whole thing, but the crash had been real. He remembered the twisted metal, the smell, the way one of the sedan's doors had hung open like a mouth, and the voice. That voice was still with him. 3 days later, he was home in Fresno, trying to get back to normal, when the phone rang. Mike had died in a crash on the I-5 near Kettleman City. Single vehicle. Hit the divider at 85 miles per hour. No alcohol. No drugs. The engine had crumpled into the cabin like a fist. Jack drove out there that night. Parked just off the shoulder and walked to the scorched patch of pavement where the fire had melted the guardrail. He stood there a long time, feeling the wind pull at his clothes. Something watched him from the dark fields beyond the highway. He couldn't see it, but he knew it was there, waiting. When he got back to his own car and turned the key, the radio clicked on. Northbound, single, vehicle, fatality, lone driver, Kettleman City, 3:44 a.m. He glanced at the clock. 3:44. The engine died. He tried the key again. Nothing. He sat in the stillness for a long time, afraid to look in the mirrors, afraid the voice would come back. He left the car on the side of the road and walked 7 miles to the nearest gas station. Didn't look back once. Jack stopped driving after that. Took the bus, walked, even hitchhiked a few times. Anything but being behind the wheel. He tried to tell people. They listened, smiled awkwardly, nodded the way people do when they think you're grieving and maybe a little broken inside. Eventually, he stopped trying. But the voice didn't stop. It didn't need the radio anymore. It spoke through old TVs, in motel lobbies, through the static of detuned speakers in grocery stores. Once, he heard it through the hum of a malfunctioning soda machine. Always calm, always just ahead of the event, southbound. 2-car collision, woman, child, I-10, 5:03 p.m. The next day, it would be in the papers, the exact details. Down to the minute, Jack started trying to warn people. That went badly. One woman screamed and called the police when he approached her in a Denny's parking lot, trying to tell her not to get in her red Toyota. Said she had a daughter in the car. Said he was threatening her. The cops came. Took him in for a psych eval. He stopped trying after that. 2. The voice didn't care. It kept talking. Not every day. Not even every week, but always enough to keep him on edge. Always enough to remind him he was part of something now. Something that wasn't meant to be understood. Some system that played through the broken wires and dead air of the world. And then one night, months later, he woke up at 2:38 a.m. with the voice whispering in his head. Not calm this time. Not distant, urgent, close. Jack, eastbound, sedan, railroad crossing, 2:47 a.m. He looked at the clock, 9 minutes. His apartment was less than a block from the tracks. He could already hear the whistle in the distance. Low and lonely. The train was coming. He ran, barefoot, in boxers, down the street, past sleeping houses and flickering porch lights. He didn't know who he was supposed to stop, only that, if he didn't, something awful would happen. There was a car already on the tracks when he got there. A woman fumbling with the gear shift, panicked, confused. Her eyes met his just as the crossing arms began to lower. Jack didn't hesitate. He yanked the door open, pulled her out, both of them stumbling and falling just as the train roared. Through like a god made of steel. The car exploded in a sound that turned his bones to jelly. She cried, thanked him, called him a hero, but he didn't hear any of it. All he heard was the voice again. Good. Just that, one word. Please. Satisfied. And then silence. He hasn't heard it since, but he still doesn't drive. They were halfway through a cross-country road trip, the kind you only do once if you make it back. Just 2 friends in a beat-up 2005 Tacoma with more dust than paint on the hood and a bed full of camping gear, fast food wrappers, and empty Gatorade bottles. Trevor had insisted on cutting through the back roads after Redding. It'll shave 2 hours off the drive, he'd said, and we'll miss all that Bay Area traffic. Jonah wasn't thrilled, but Trevor always drove like he was chasing something, and once he made up his mind, you could either buckle up or get left behind. It was late afternoon when they realized they were low on gas. The orange fuel light flicked on with a soft ding, and Trevor cursed under his breath. The pine trees had grown thicker around them, and the 2-lane blacktop felt more like an animal trail winding through the Shasta National Forest than a proper highway. They hadn't seen another car for over an hour. We'll be fine, Trevor said. Tapping the fuel gauge like that might convince it to climb back up. Just gotta keep our eyes open. That was when they saw the sign. Weather-worn leaning. Slightly to the left, as if whatever held it up had started to rot. Shale Oaks 5 miles. Services. The word services was spray-painted on crudely, but they didn't question it. Gas was gas, and the needle was practically kissing E. The road narrowed even more as they drove into what looked like a bowl cut into the forest. The trees pressed in from both sides, casting long shadows that moved like arms across the windshield. There were no other signs, no markers, just a slow curve into a hollow of old oaks and sagging buildings. Then, like someone flipped a switch, they were suddenly in the town. Storefronts lined the main street. There was a hardware store, a barber shop, a pharmacy with a faded Rexall sign, and even a diner called Darcy's. All of them had their lights on. Warm yellow light glowed through the windows like someone was home. There were cars parked along the street, some old, some newer, all in pristine condition, like they'd just been washed and parked. But no one sat in them, no engines running, no people walking the sidewalks, no kids playing. Not a single sound. Except the engine of their truck humming low and uncertain. Trevor slowed to a crawl, peering out the window like he expected someone to step out and wave them over. Jonah sat straighter in his seat, his hand already resting on the door handle, the way he did when something felt wrong. Feels like a set, he muttered. What? A movie set. Too clean. Too quiet. Trevor scoffed, but there was an edge. In his voice, there's gotta be a gas station. They passed one at the edge of town, an old Sinclair station with the green dinosaur faded to a chalky white. The pump had one of those old-school handles with a spinning dial and a cracked bell above the awning. The place was lit up too. But no clerk behind the glass, no open sign. Just rows of glass bottles in the windows and a rack of newspapers yellowed by time. Trevor pulled in anyway. I'll just knock. Somebody's gotta be around. He stepped out, and the sound of his boots on the concrete echoed too long, as if the town itself was holding its breath. Jonah stayed in the cab, watching. Trevor tried the door. It opened. He disappeared inside. 1 minute, 2, 3. The sky had started to dim. The sun was dipping behind the oaks like it was being swallowed. Jonah rolled down the window and called out. No answer. Then he heard it. Ding. A soft melodic chime. Then another. Then more. Bells ringing in sequence like a carillon, except they weren't coming from the gas station. They were coming from everywhere. Every building on Main Street. The sound was impossibly synchronized, like a dozen bells on a dozen buildings had been waiting for just the right moment. Then the doors opened. Not violently. Not suddenly. Slowly. Like hands had turned the knobs gently and pushed. Every building's front door swung open at once. Hardware store, diner, pharmacy, the barber shop with the old striped pole still spinning. They all opened wide. Not a soul walked out. Trevor burst back into the truck, white as a ghost, panting. Hard. We need to go. We need to go now. Jonah didn't argue. He threw the truck into reverse, tires squealing on the pavement. The bells kept ringing. And as they peeled out onto the road leading back to the forest, Jonah glanced in the side mirror. He wished he hadn't. Every doorway now had someone standing in it. Just silhouettes, dark, featureless, unmoving. They didn't wave. They didn't walk. They just stood there like they were watching the truck leave, like they had all come out for the show. They didn't stop driving until the road spat them out onto a larger state route and the trees began to thin. Trevor pulled over, shaking, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Did you see them? He asked, voice barely a whisper. Yeah, Jonah said. I saw them. Neither of them spoke for a long while. They tried to pull it up on Google Maps. Nothing. No Shale Oaks. Not in the area, not in California, not anywhere. They scoured forums, Reddit, weird travel blogs, nothing, only the forest. Only trees and ridges and miles of nothing. Trevor never talked about what he saw in that gas station. He'd start, then stop, like his throat would close up. The one time Jonah pressed him, he muttered something about photos on the wall and eyes that moved. He started sleeping with the lights on, wouldn't go near small towns. He even quit his job and moved south, closer to cities. Jonah didn't ask questions. He was having the same dreams. Always the bells. Always the doors creaking open. Always those silhouettes, standing in the warm light, waiting. A year later, they passed through the Shasta area again during the day with a friend driving and the windows rolled down. They looked for the road, for the sign. There was nothing, just endless forest and sky. Trevor said maybe. The town only appears when it's needed, when something out there is hungry and looking. Like a mouth that opens just wide enough to let you in, then vanishes. Jonah didn't argue, because every now and then, when the wind was just right and the world got quiet enough, he swore he could hear the bells. She was crying behind a stall door, a soft, wet sob that echoed a little too clearly off the tile walls. The traveler paused mid-step, his hand still hovering near the paper towel dispenser. It was late past midnight and the rest stop was a ghost of itself. Only one flickering overhead light in the bathroom, buzzing like a trapped wasp. He thought at first he might be alone, but the sobbing cut through the hum and buzz, lonely and low, and it didn't stop. "Hey," he said, cautious, hesitant. "You all right in there?" No answer, just the crying, faint and broken, like a child trying to hide it. He stepped toward the stall door, hesitated just outside it. The door was closed, but not locked. He could see the little silver latch hadn't slid into place. She must have been sitting on the toilet, maybe hunched forward, maybe sick or strung out. He caught the faintest whiff of something acrid vinegar and rot. "You need help?" He asked again. The crying stopped. He waited, heart thudding. Something about the sudden silence was worse than the crying. The kind of silence that presses on your ears, makes you feel like you're underwater. Then came the laughter. Not loud at first, but low and guttural, like a bad impression of a human being. It rose in volume, strange and garbled, until it wasn't laughter at all, but a sound like teeth clicking together and breath being forced through them. It was wrong. Animal, maybe, or something pretending to be animal. He turned and ran nearly, slipped on the damp tile, and pushed through the metal door with both hands. Out into the desert air, dry and sharp and stinking of warm asphalt and dust. The convenience store was 20 yards away, lit up like a UFO in the dark. He sprinted. For a dot inside, the clerk barely looked up from behind the bulletproof glass. Young guy, lanky, red t-shirt stained with grease around the neck. The traveler caught his breath, hands on knees, still shaking. "There's someone in the women's bathroom," he panted. Crying, then laughing. "I think she's messed up, or sick, or I don't know, man. It was bad." "Something's not right." The clerk's eyes slowly lifted to meet his, and then they went wide. He stood up, mouth slightly open. "Which bathroom?" "The one on the south side, next to the vending machines. Women's." The clerk swallowed. "That bathroom's been locked for weeks." The traveler just stared. No, it wasn't. The door opened. The light was on. "I heard her." "No," the clerk cut in, voice firmer now. "It's padlocked. Has been since May. Pipe burst under the floor. You sure you weren't in the men's?" "I know which bathroom I walked into." The clerk was quiet a moment. Then he motioned to a door behind the counter and stepped out. Keys jangling on a long plastic coil hooked to his belt. "Show me." They walked out together, the desert wind kicking sand across the concrete. A distant freight truck hummed by on I-15, heading west toward Barstow. The traveler pointed at the bathroom. The door stood slightly ajar, light glowing dimly from inside. The clerk stopped. His face went pale. "There's no power to that room," he whispered. "We cut it at the breaker weeks ago." But the light was on. The clerk stepped forward, fumbling with the keyring, hands shaking. He pushed the door open with the toe of his boot and stepped inside. The traveler followed, slower. Now heart hammering. The room was empty. No crying. No laughter. Nothing. Just a long smear of something black across the wall where the mirror used to be. The mirror was shattered on the floor, jagged triangles reflecting broken bits of their faces. And on the frame above the sink, deep gouges claw. Marks carved into the metal like someone had tried to climb through. The clerk backed out fast. Locked the door behind him. Back inside the store, he made a call to someone, a supervisor maybe, but the traveler only caught a few words. Again, same time, mirror, not a person. That was when the clerk told him. 2:13 a.m. That's when it always started. The crying. The laughter. The sound of the toilet flushing. Sometimes travelers reported it. Most didn't. Sometimes they left without buying gas, without saying anything at all. But every night, exactly at 2:13, the security cameras showed the light flick. On in the women's bathroom, the bulb had been unscrewed. No power ran to that outlet. The toilet still flushed. Maintenance had replaced the plumbing twice. No leak, no issue. But the toilet would flush just once at 2:13. A loud, echoing flush like someone pulling the handle hard. They'd tried to padlock it, weld it shut. One morning the door was open again. No sign of forced entry, but fresh gouges in the doorframe. It started, the clerk said, about a year ago, after a woman went missing. A young mother traveling alone headed to Barstow to visit her sister. She stopped at the rest stop to use the bathroom. Her car was found in the lot. Door wide open, engine still warm. Her purse on the passenger seat, but no trace of her. No signs of struggle. No prints, no blood. Just a strange scratch pattern. On the inside of the bathroom stall. The same stall. They closed it down after that, but it didn't stop. People kept hearing her, or what sounded like her. A month later, a highway worker was found dead behind the building. Heart attack, they said, but his face was frozen in terror, like he'd seen something that stopped him cold. His truck radio was still on. The time frozen on the dash, 2:13. The traveler didn't sleep that night. Drove straight through to Vegas. Windows cracked, music blaring. Anything to drown out the echo of that laugh. He checked into a motel around 6 a.m., finally convinced himself it was over. But that night in his cheap motel bathroom, he heard the toilet flush. At exactly 2:13 a.m. No one else was in the room. He got back in his car the next morning. Thought about calling someone, reporting it. But who do you call? A plumber? A priest? He didn't drive through Barstow again, ever. But he kept the receipt from the gas station still in his glove box. Just to prove it happened, stamped with the time. 2:13 a.m. It was supposed to be a straightforward drive. A long one, shore crossing half the country tends to drag, but nothing strange. Nothing worth remembering except maybe the gas station coffee and the endless ribbon of asphalt. Parker and Jess were headed to Sacramento, leaving Cheyenne at dawn, just trying to beat the mountain storms that always seem to blow in fast and mean this time of year. Their Subaru was packed to the windows with boxes, wedding gifts, mostly, and the back seat smelled faintly of old cardboard and that plasticky new blender scent. They were newlyweds, about 4 months in. Parker was a software engineer. Jess taught middle school science. Sensible people, grounded people. Not the type you'd expect to get tangled up in something like this. By the time they reached the Sierra foothills, the sun was edging past noon, and the GPS had that smug tone it always took when it sensed you weren't paying close enough attention. In 1.2 miles, take exit 241. Parker squinted through the windshield. Exit 241? He muttered. That doesn't sound right. Jess looked up from her phone. That's what it says on Google, too. There's a frontage road that shaves off 15 minutes. Looks like it loops behind the ridge and reconnects near Emigrant Gap. He nodded. All right, less traffic. I'll take it. The exit ramp didn't look wrong, exactly. Just narrower than expected. There were no other cars around, which wasn't too surprising. This stretch of I-80 was long and dull and prone to accidents, so a lot of drivers just plowed straight through without stopping. But the second they turned off the main highway, Jess looked back and frowned. What? She hesitated. I swear the exit sign just blinked out. Parker checked the mirror. Nothing. Just a swath of trees and shoulder grass. No sign, no posts, no sign of a sign. Probably just the angle, he said, but the road narrowed faster than expected. Asphalt gave way to rougher, older blacktop, the kind with cracks and faded yellow lines. Then, not a quarter mile in, the pavement crumbled into hard-packed gravel. Then a dirt trail wide enough for one vehicle winding into the dense woods. No road markers, no signposts. Just a narrow track slicing between thick pines and crumbling rock. Jess shifted in her seat. This doesn't look like a road that sees much use, Parker slowed. I mean, it's still going the right direction. Westbound. Probably just a maintenance shortcut. He didn't sound confident. The forest grew denser with every turn, the trees looming taller, shadows getting longer even though it was barely early afternoon. The Subaru's tires crunched over roots and pebbles. The canopy overhead closed tighter, filtering the sunlight until it felt like dusk. Then the dirt trail opened up, not into another road, not even a proper clearing. Just a wide, flat field, maybe the size of a baseball diamond, ringed with dry grass and low, skeletal trees that didn't match the pines they'd just driven through. And in the center of the field stood an old billboard. It was tall, wooden, clearly rotting. Most of the paint had peeled off, but the message was still clear. Big, faded red letters that once might have been cheerful, but now looked more like a warning. Welcome back. Jess whispered. Back where? Parker didn't answer. He just stared at it, one hand still on the gear shift. There was no other structure in sight. No house, no shack, no fence or farm equipment. Just that one billboard standing alone in the middle of nowhere. He finally spoke. We're turning around. They reversed in a wide arc, gravel crunching under the tires, and drove back the way they came. Or tried to, because the road wasn't there anymore. Where the dirt path should have been, there were only trees. Not broken or disturbed, no tire tracks. No indentation of a road, just untouched forest, thick and silent and still. Parker slammed the brakes. This isn't right. He got out of the car, stood there with his hands on his hips, and stared at the tree line like it would blink and give the path back. Jess joined him, eyes wide. There was a road, she said, her voice flat. I saw it. We drove in on it. Now there was only forest. Old forest with moss-covered trunks and undergrowth too thick to walk through. They circled the field twice. Jess took pictures on her phone, but the screen refused to focus. Everything came out blurry and overexposed, even though the lighting looked normal to the naked eye. They checked the GPS. No signal, Parker said. Dead. Not even emergency bars. Jess frowned. Mine too. That's not normal. They got back in the car and tried to find a way through the trees, easing the Subaru between trunks, But it was impossible. Nature didn't part for them. Branches scraped the sides. Roots rocked the tires. They backed out, tried the other side of the clearing. Nothing. And something was wrong with the sun. It had been high overhead when they took the exit. Now it was already dipping westward, lower than it should have been. Jess looked at the dashboard. The car clock says 3:47. That's not right. It's only been, 10 minutes? Parker nodded slowly. Yeah, neither of them said what they were thinking. Not yet. They drove around the clearing in circles until Parker spotted something in opening. A narrow corridor between two leaning trees that looked possible. Maybe the beginning of a path. Maybe nothing. But it was better than sitting still. He turned the wheel and nosed the Subaru through. Branches screeched against the windows. The undergrowth thinned, then thickened again, then thinned. It was like the forest couldn't make up its mind whether it wanted to let them go. Then suddenly, they were on pavement. Old, cracked, but unmistakable. A narrow two-lane blacktop with a faded center line and tire grooves. And more importantly, signs of civilization. A road sign ahead. I-80 WEST 2. Miles. Jess nearly cried. They followed the road out, hearts pounding. The sun dropped behind the trees like a stone. They hit the highway again at a different exit 235, 6 miles west of where they'd started. Merging back onto I-80 felt like waking from a bad dream, but it hadn't ended, because when they checked their phones again, signal returned. So did GPS. The map showed their location clearly, but the car clock was now reading 4:13 p.m. They'd only been off the highway for maybe 10 minutes. 15, tops. Jess looked at her phone. Sunset's not for 2 more hours. Why does it look like it's almost down? The shadows were long, the light golden and dying. The day was speeding toward night like it was late for something. They drove the rest of the way in silence, too shaken to talk. They passed the original exit 241, but there was nothing there. No ramp, no sign. Just a sheer drop and a wall of pines when they got to. I'd been driving for days by the time I rolled into the outskirts of Joshua Tree. I was chasing the solitude. Not the desert beauty, not the air and stars that Instagram loves so much. I wanted to be alone in a way that most people don't understand. The kind of alone where you could scream and no one would answer. The kind where even your thoughts echo. I'd just gone through a messy, drawn-out breakup with someone who'd twisted love into obligation, and my father, who I hadn't spoken to in 6 years, had just died and left me nothing but a voicemail. That ended with static and what sounded like a second voice whispering under his own. I needed to vanish for a while, and Joshua Tree, with its thousands of square miles of nothingness, felt like the right kind of nowhere. I packed my truck with 2 weeks' worth of canned food, batteries, my Canon R5, and enough water to survive. A minor apocalypse. I took the unmarked service roads that split off from the main highway like spider legs, eventually finding a spot so far from civilization that I couldn't even see the faint glow of distant towns. Just desert. Just the scrubby little Joshua trees like twisted dancers frozen mid-spin, and the monolithic rocks that looked like they'd been left behind by giants. I pitched my tent just before dusk, lit a small fire, and took a few shots of the dying sun bleeding across the jagged horizon. It wasn't until the second night that I noticed them. Had my camera set up on a tripod to capture long exposures of the stars, nothing professional, just for the sake of doing it. Around 2 in the morning, while reviewing shots from earlier, I noticed something off. A blur in the background of one photo, something low to the ground. It wasn't clear, just a pale smudge at the edge of the frame, close to a boulder maybe 100 yards from camp. I figured it was a coyote or even a trick of the light. The desert does strange things at night. You think you hear voices in the wind or see movement in the corner of your eye. I let it go. The third night was colder. Wind cut through my sleeping bag and the silence pressed in hard. It was the kind of silence where even the crackling of the fire seemed intrusive. That's when I saw the movement again, this time with my own eyes. They were clustered around that same boulder, maybe 50 yards out, pale shapes, dozens of them. At first, I thought I was looking at a group of hairless animals, possums, or something, but they moved wrong. They crawled low, elbows and knees grinding against the sand like their bones didn't quite work right. And they were naked, their skin nearly glowing in the moonlight. No hair, no clothes. Just pale, crawling bodies, all facing the rock like it was a shrine. I stood frozen for what felt like hours, heart hammering. I lifted my camera, zoomed in. I don't even remember clicking the shutter. I was too focused on their faces, or what I thought were faces, hollow eyes that never blinked. Slits for mouths stretched impossibly wide, like they were smiling. Not happy smiles, hungry ones. Like they knew I was watching. Then one of them turned its head toward me. It didn't rise or scream or move fast like some horror movie. It just looked, and the others followed. Dozens of heads turning in unison like they shared a mind. I don't remember running, but I know I grabbed my gear and bolted into the tent, zipped it up like canvas could protect me from whatever they were. I didn't sleep. I didn't breathe. I just listened. And the worst part? Nothing happened. No footsteps, no dragging sounds. Just silence. By dawn, they were gone. I opened the tent cautiously, camera still in hand. The fire had died to cold embers. The boulder stood untouched, the ground around it unmarked. No footprints. No sign of movement. I laughed it off. Told myself I'd had a bad dream, maybe sleep paralysis. Until I found the camera dot, it wasn't where I left it. I'd left it on the tripod outside. Now it was inside the tent, smashed. The lens cracked straight through, screen flickering, body crushed like it had been stepped on. I didn't hear anything all night, not even the zipper open. There was only one image left on the card before it corrupted completely. I transferred it to my laptop before it died. Just one frame. It showed the things, at least 20 of them, crawling around the boulder. Some on their backs, limbs contorted, jaws slack like broken dolls. And one of them was closer than I remembered. Too close. Right at the edge of the frame, grinning. Its eyes were wrong, two wide pits, black and endless, but the smile. I've never seen anything like it. A mouth stretched so far it looked like the skin should have split. It didn't smile like. It was happy. It smiled like it had waited for me. Like it knew I was always going to come there. I deleted the image. Then I deleted it from the trash. Then I smashed the card with a rock until it was just glittering fragments. But I still see it in my head, clear as anything. I can still feel the stare of that one thing in the foreground. I left that morning. Didn't even pack properly. Just threw everything into the truck and tore down that dusty road like a bat out of hell. I didn't stop until I hit the gas station. Outside Palm Springs, where I sat in the parking lot for an hour, trying not to puke. That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've had the same dream every night. I'm in the tent. The zipper opens, so slowly it doesn't make a sound. They crawl in, not walking, not standing, just slithering like worms with bones. Their mouths are open. Their teeth aren't sharp, but they're wrong. Too many. 2. Smooth, like baby teeth, all lined up in neat little rows. I wake up screaming. Every single night. I told myself I wouldn't talk about it, that no one would believe me. But a few days ago, I found something online. A Reddit thread about unexplained sightings in the desert. Most were hoaxes, blurry lights, Bigfoot crap. But one post chilled my blood. It was a grainy image taken 6 years ago near the same area. It showed pale shapes clustered around a rock. The same kind of rock, the same formation. Only this one was taken during the day, and they weren't crawling, they were buried. Half of their bodies sticking out of the sand like they were waiting to be unearthed. No one in the comments took it seriously. But I knew. I knew exactly what I was looking at. I don't sleep anymore. I can't. I keep my apartment lit all night, camera on my desk, pointed at the window just in case. I know I left them in the desert. I know I drove hundreds of miles away. But sometimes, when it's really quiet, I hear the zipper of my tent. Not the sound itself, just the idea of it. That teeth-on-teeth sliding sound. I hear it in my head. Right before sleep, and I know they're getting closer. They were 2 hours outside of Houston when the low fuel light pinged on the dash, just a soft yellow glow, but enough to start the low hum of tension inside the car. Natalie sat up straighter in the passenger seat, rushing potato chip crumbs from her jeans, while her husband Ron squinted ahead through the windshield, his knuckles tightening around the wheel. The sun had already dipped behind the pine-lined horizon, leaving behind that weird liminal dusk that settles over East Texas, where everything seems bleached and gray and silence. Their daughter Claire was asleep in the back, arms limp at her sides, mouth slightly open. Ron mumbled, "Should have stopped in Crockett." Natalie didn't argue. It wouldn't help now. The stretch of Route 287 that cuts through Redding was always quiet, 2 lanes winding past abandoned farms and water towers with faded paint, a place where most GPS apps dropped out and only AM radio stations came in strong. Places like this didn't advertise gas stations and certainly didn't build new ones. Then they saw it. Just as they crested a hill and began sliding into a shallow valley, a warm golden light flickered to life at the roadside. It didn't flash like neon, but glowed steadily, calmly, almost like it had been waiting for them. A Shell station, small, boxy, old school, with one island of 2 pumps and a squat building behind them with dirty windows and a buzzing red open sign. There was no other traffic in sight. No homes, just trees, grass, and that golden glow on the concrete like a dream painted over the landscape. Ron slowed the car and turned in. The pavement was smooth, too smooth for how old the station looked, and there wasn't a single oil stain or cigarette butt on the ground. The pumps didn't ask for cards. Instead, an old analog dial ticked upward with a satisfying mechanical chug as the gas flowed. A man stepped out of the station. He was tall, thin, wore a gray work shirt with the name Hank stitched in red thread over the breast. His face was lean and sun-darkened, with a long scar that started just under his left eye and ran down to his jaw like a jagged river. Despite that, he smiled kindly. "Y'all found us," he said. "Not many folks take this road anymore. Lucky you." Natalie stepped out and stretched, breathing in deeply. The air smelled faintly of gasoline, yes, but something else too, something sweet and dusty, like cedar and rotting peaches. She wrinkled her nose but said nothing. Claire stirred in the back seat and sat up, blinking. Inside the station, the lights hummed low and orange, like a living room lamp left on too long. The walls were lined with old candy bars, Fritos in sun-bleached bags, and rows of dusty soda bottles with faded labels. At the counter stood a teenage girl with pale blonde hair pulled into a tight braid. She looked about 16 and wore a plain white t-shirt, no name tag, no cell phone. She smiled too, but her eyes DIDN single quotes T. Natalie picked up a bottle of Coke and carried it to the register. The girl rang it up with a soft ding from the cash register, an honest-to-God register with chrome buttons and a spring-loaded drawer. No scanner, no screen. Natalie handed her a 20, and the girl counted back change methodically, 1 coin at a time, her lips moving silently. Then she handed Natalie a receipt. It was a long, thin slip, the kind that curled on its own. At the bottom, where the address should have been, there was nothing. Just the date, March 6, 1967. Natalie frowned, then flipped it over, thinking it was a mistake. Nothing. Just that one line. She turned to say something, but the girl was already looking away, wiping the counter with a rag, slow and circular. Ron. Finished fueling, thanked Hank, and they drove off. As the wheels crunched over the perfectly smooth pavement, Natalie glanced back. The station still glowed. Hank raised a hand in farewell. Claire leaned forward and said, "The girl in the store had black stuff on her fingers. Like she'd been playing in ash." Ron shrugged. "Just dirt." They made it to their motel outside Houston by 11:30 p.m. It was a boxy, forgettable building next to a Sonic, and the room smelled faintly of mildew and bug spray. While Claire fell asleep watching old cartoons, Natalie sat on the edge of the bed, receipt in hand. She showed it to Ron. He turned it over twice. "Probably some dumb tourist gimmick," he said. "Like a retro thing. Gas stations do that crap sometimes." "Without an address?" He didn't answer. They both looked out the motel window at the dark highway beyond. It felt wrong, like they'd slipped through something, passed into a place they shouldn't have been allowed. The next morning, Natalie insisted they go back, just to see. She even joked that it'd be funny if it wasn't there anymore. Ron agreed, half laughing. They checked out of the motel, grabbed some coffee, and headed north. The road was emptier than the night before. Fog clung to the hills in slow waves, and they didn't pass a single car for 30 miles. When they reached the hill before the station, Natalie felt her chest tighten. There should have been the Shell sign, that soft yellow glow. But there was only flat, overgrown land and a crumbling concrete slab, rubble, rusted beams, and blackened stone that looked like it had been scorched decades ago. They pulled over and got out. The air reeked of gasoline. It was heavy, metallic, sour. Natalie covered her mouth with her sleeve. Claire stayed in the car, staring through the window, wide-eyed and silent. There was a tree growing through what used to be the station's front window. Scorched roots curled around old bricks. Melted glass glinted in the grass. Natalie stepped over a pile of cinders and found what looked like the corner of a metal sign, its lettering eaten away by rust and time. On it, barely visible beneath the corrosion, was the faded yellow of a Shell logo. She turned to Ron, who was kneeling by the pump island. One of the pumps had been bent in half, crushed by time or fire or something else. He held up a scrap of metal. "This says closed due to fire hazard, dated 1969. That's 2 years after the receipt." "I know." They didn't speak much on the drive home. Claire asked once where the nice man had gone and why the station burned down. Natalie didn't answer. Her hands were shaking, even on the steering wheel. That night, Natalie couldn't sleep. She kept thinking of Hank's smile, the neat scar, the girl wiping the counter in slow, endless circles. She got out of bed, turned on her laptop, and started searching. Local news, archives, anything. After an hour, she found it. A short newspaper clipping scanned from microfilm, with a headline that read, "Gas station blaze kills 2. It was dated March 6, 1967. The article was short. A fire broke out at a Shell station near Reading around 10 p.m. The source was never identified. A man named Henry Hank Crowder, 43, and a girl believed to be his daughter were found inside, bodies severely burned. The girl was never named. No witnesses. The station was closed permanently. Later condemned. Natalie stared at the screen, breath gone. The receipt was still on the nightstand. When she picked it up, it was cold, not just room temp cold. Ice cold. like something pulled from a freezer. The next morning, Claire was gone. Her shoes were still by the bed, her favorite stuffed rabbit under the pillow. No open windows, no sound. Just a strange, lingering scent in the air, gasoline and peaches. They searched for days. Police, dogs, helicopters, nothing. The authorities kept saying she must have wandered off, maybe taken. But there was no forced entry, no signs. Just that smell. Natalie didn't go back to work. Ron did, but barely. He started drinking, talking to himself sometimes, asking questions no one could answer. A week later, Natalie found the receipt again. She'd thrown it away, she swore she had, but it was back on the nightstand. Same date, same curl of paper, same cold, and something new written in black smudge across the bottom. Where the address had never been was a single word, home. She burned it. But sometimes, when the house is still and the wind isn't moving, she swears she can smell peaches and gas. And if she looks just right out the bedroom window, in the direction of that highway near Reading, she thinks she can see a golden light, still waiting. The first time I drove up Devil's Slide on Highway 1, it was dusk and the cliffs looked like they were bleeding. The sun, dipping west into the Pacific, had turned the horizon a thick, syrupy red that seemed to drip over the jagged rock faces. A thin fog had started to creep in from the ocean, softening the edges of the coastline but doing nothing to dampen the sense of unease that settles in your gut when you're alone on that stretch of highway. The road hugs the cliffs like it's afraid of them, winding and narrow, with nothing but a shoulder-wide barrier between you and a drop so sheer it looks like the earth just gave up. They say that part of the road's cursed. People used to blame the crashes and disappearances on faulty construction or slick weather, but that's not the story locals tell. The ones who've lived in Pacifica long enough, those quiet, leathery-faced types who sip black coffee and won't look you in the eye when you ask about the cliffs, they talk about the crows. Not like it's a joke. Not like it's just one of those old wives' tales used to keep teenagers from drinking near the edge. They speak about the birds with something close to reverence and fear. They'll say the crows at Devil's Slide don't just hang around. For carrion, they're watchers, gatekeepers. They don't stop you from falling, but sometimes they stop you from jumping. And sometimes they don single quotes T. I met Frank Laramie the week before he vanished. I was staying at a motel in Pacifica, nothing fancy. Just a 2-story place off the side of the highway with cigarette burns in the comforters and salt air rusting the stair rails. I'd driven up from Austin after a long year of failed freelancing gigs, 2 breakups, and the quiet death of my father. The ocean had seemed like a kind of answer, or at least a temporary distraction. Something big and constant and loud enough to drown out the static in my head. I hadn't planned to stay more than a few days. Then I met Frank sitting on the low stone wall behind the motel, smoking a pipe and staring out at the sea like it owed him something. He was old, maybe mid-60s, with a white beard that curled at the edges and a denim jacket worn pale at the shoulders. There was something solid about him, something hard to ignore. When he turned his head to glance at me, it felt like being sized up by a judge. "You're not from here," he said, "just passing through." He nodded slowly, tapping his pipe against the wall. "That's what I said, 35 years ago, and here I am." "You like it here?" He looked out at the cliffs. "Not especially." That was our first exchange. The next night, I brought him a 6-pack and sat beside him. We didn't talk much. Frank didn't seem to need conversation, just presence. Eventually, he started to tell me things about the highway, about the slide, about the crows. "There's been at least 24 jumpers in the last 10 years, he said, sipping a beer. "Used to be more, before they rebuilt the tunnel and shut off the old road. People drive out there, park at the edge, and just step out. Like it was the easiest thing in the world. They always found the cars, not always the bodies. I asked him why that was. He said, "Sometimes the ocean doesn't give them back." I laughed quietly. "You think there's something down there?" He glanced at me. "Not down there. Up there." He pointed toward the sky. It was almost black now, the last glow of sun slipping behind the mountains. I looked up and saw nothing. "No stars, no birds, crows," he said. "You'll see them. They come at dawn and dusk, big flocks, loud bastards." I nodded, pretending to understand. He added, "They know things. They see you." The next morning, I woke to the sound of cawing. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, something primal and sharp echoing through a foggy dreamscape, but then I sat up and realized it was real. I pulled back the curtain and saw them, hundreds of black wings slicing through the air above the cliffside. It was like a storm cloud with feathers. They weren't flying in a pattern, but they weren't chaotic either. It was coordinated, like a dance without music. I threw on a jacket and walked out behind the motel. Frank was already there. "They come every morning," he said without turning. "Sometimes at night too. Depends on who's out there." I watched them circle, fascinated and a little unsettled. "They ever get close?" He gave me a look. "If they like you, yeah. And if they don't, they let you fall." That should have been my cue to laugh and walk away. I didn't. Something in his voice, the cold certainty, the weariness made it stick in my chest like a fishhook. He told me the story of a woman named Carla Reyes, a young teacher who'd driven out to the slide after losing her job and a nasty custody battle. According to Frank, she sat in her car for almost 4 hours before she opened the door and stepped out. She stood at the edge for 10 minutes, crying. Frank saw it happen. He lived just up the road and often walked that stretch at night. He said the crows were there too, circling, cawing. She looked up at them like she was hearing something, he said. Then she stepped back, got in the car, drove away. I asked if he spoke to her afterward. He nodded. She said they were laughing, he said, that she heard kids laughing, like it was coming from inside the cliffs, echoing up. She said it was wrong, the kind of laughter that makes your teeth itch. I didn't believe him, not really, but I started to notice the crows more. They didn't behave like normal birds. They didn't scatter when you walked too close. They'd watch, lined up along the railing or huddled on the signs, heads tilted, like they were trying to place you. Their eyes were too bright, too knowing. One night, a week after meeting Frank, I heard a knock at my door. It was nearly midnight. I opened it to find him standing there, eyes wild and wet, hands trembling. I went out there tonight, he said, to the slide. Why? They called me. The laughing, it came back. He sat on the edge of my bed and told me that he'd heard it again clearer than ever. Children, dozens of them, laughing like they were playing hide-and-seek in a graveyard. The sound was coming from the cliffs. He said it pulled at him, not like a voice in his head, but something behind the eyes, like a hook in the brain. I got to the edge, he said. Couldn't stop myself. I looked down, and they were there, hundreds of crows, sitting, not flying, lined up on the rocks like little judges. I asked what stopped him. They stood up, he said, all at once, wings out, like they were telling me, not tonight, Frank. He didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. In the morning, he was gone. The motel clerk said he checked. Out before dawn, left the key in the box. No note. I went to the slide that evening. Parked at the old turnout where the fence was rusted and bent from years of salt and wind. Walked up to the edge. The wind was fierce but warm. Smelled of brine and something faintly sweet, like decaying flowers, The crows were there, They came slowly, at first 1, 2, a dozen, then 100. Circling, crying, but it wasn't a call. Not really. It was laughter, childlike, distant, but clear, echoing off the stone like it was trapped in some invisible pocket of space. I stared out at the sea. The waves below didn't look like water. They looked like mouths. Then I heard something behind me, footsteps. I turned, no one. But there was a shadow on the pavement. Not mine. Taller, thinner. It flickered once, then vanished. The crows stopped. For a moment, the air was dead still. Then, they dove, hundreds of them. Straight down toward the ocean. Not attacking. Not scattering. Just dropping, like black rain. I stepped back. The laughter stopped, and in the silence, I heard Frank's voice, faint, hollow, like it was coming up through the rocks. Not tonight. He whispered, I left Pacifica the next day. Haven't been back since. But sometimes, when I'm driving along some lonely stretch of road in the middle of nowhere, I'll see one of them. A single crow perched on a sign or a wire, watching, and I'll hear it, that laughter, cold and wrong, like a warning. They call it the Screaming Mile, a stretch of Route 58 between Bakersfield and Barstow where the desert hums and the wind carries things you can't explain. It's just past mile marker 212, a piece of cracked highway flanked by Joshua. Trees and forgotten roadside shrines, sun-bleached flowers and rusting teddy bears tied to guardrails. Every long-haul driver in Southern California knows it, even if they pretend they don't. Some speed up when they approach it. Some cut the CB. A few don't drive at night anymore at all. And some just disappear. They say it starts quiet. You're rolling along with the windows down, late-night static on the radio, nothing but road and dust ahead. Then your CB crackles, just a whisper at first, too faint to catch, then clearer. A woman's voice, screaming, sometimes sobbing. Always the same message, help me, somebody please, over and over. It lasts about a minute. Then nothing. Truckers swap the stories like trading cards. Each has a version, each with a little twist. One guy claims he heard the scream and suddenly saw brake lights ahead, then realized he was the only one on the road. Another says the voice knew his name. A woman, crying, saying, "John, please, he's coming." He checked his logs later. Hadn't signed on as John in weeks. And then there's Eddie Navarro. Eddie used to run produce out of Fresno. Quiet guy, good driver, never late on a load. He was solid. Then one night he pulled over near the mile just past 3 a.m. mid-September. Heat still clinging to the asphalt like sweat. He told a dispatcher on the CB he was going to check it out, said he couldn't stand the sound. Sighed, "I think someone's really hurt out here. I gotta help." That was the last thing Eddie ever said. When they found him 2 days later, he was sitting in the dirt beside his rig, right at the shoulder near marker 213. Engine off, keys in the seat, cab door still open. He wasn't hurt, just gone. His eyes didn't focus. He didn't speak, wouldn't eat. All he did was hum, softly, tunelessly, like a lullaby. But it only started after sundown, and only when he was alone. He still hums today. Lives in a Care. Home outside Barstow. They tried to get him to talk psych evaluations, memory tests, regression therapy. Nothing helped. But if you shine a flashlight in his face at night, he flinches like you hit him. I used to think it was a myth. The Screaming Mile was one of those campfire tales for truck stops like Phantom Hitchhikers or The Girl in White. Something to keep you awake when the road gets too long. But then I drove it. I took the 58 eastbound in late October 2 years ago. I was moving furniture for a couple that had relocated to Flagstaff. Nothing special. Mostly night driving, quieter. Less traffic. I didn't think twice about the route. Hell, I even joked about it when I stopped for gas in Bakersfield. The old guy at the pump just looked at me and said, "Keep your windows up. Don't listen if she starts screaming." That stuck with me. Somehow the desert looked unreal that night, stretched out under a fat yellow moon, everything sharp-edged and empty. No headlights for miles. Just the hum of tires and the thrum of the engine. I had the CB on but low, half listening to late-night chatter from passing rigs. That's when it happened. It started as a buzz static, barely noticeable. Then a voice broke through, sudden and raw. "Help me. Please, somebody help me." I froze. It didn't sound like a radio transmission. It sounded close, too close. Like she was in the cab with me. The voice cracked with terror, but there was something else underneath: urgency, desperation, like she'd been screaming forever and was just now breaking through. I turned the volume down. Didn't matter. She kept screaming, "Help me. I'm out here. Please. Don't let him take me." I pulled the CB plug from the dash. The screaming didn't stop. It echoed inside my head, not from the speakers. I can't explain it. It was like she'd tunneled in somehow. I pulled over without thinking, just past the marker 213, same one they found Eddie at. The truck lights lit up the sand and brush. I sat there, shaking, trying to make sense of what I just heard. Then it stopped. Silence. No wind, no sound. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. I opened the door and stepped out. The heat had broken, but the air still felt wrong, thick, heavy, like breathing in cotton. I walked a few feet into the dark. My flashlight caught twisted metal in the brush, a rusted bumper, maybe 20 feet off the road. Could have been from a wreck, but I didn't remember seeing a report. I kept walking. That's when I heard it. Not a scream, a whisper. Right behind me, wrong turn. The voice was right at my ear. Close enough that I felt the breath on my neck. I spun around with the flashlight. Nothing. Just my truck. Taillights glowing faint red. No sign of anyone. I ran back, jumped in, locked the doors. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't drive. I just sat there, staring at the road ahead, until the sun rose like a bloody eye over the desert. I don't take that route anymore. Not even in daylight. I tried to forget it, convince myself it was stress, hallucination, maybe even some elaborate prank, but I've heard too many others talk about the whisper. Not the scream, they all mention that, but the whisper only comes if you stop. Some say the road wasn't always there. Before the 58 cut through the hills, there was a dirt track called Cutter's Pass. They say a man named Jonah Cutter ran a homestead near where the highway is now. Had a wife, Maria, and a little girl. One night, back in the 1890s, he went mad. Killed a traveler with an axe, then slaughtered his family, burying their bodies in shallow graves by the road. Local stories claimed he kept hearing Maria scream for days after. Eventually, he walked into the desert and never came back. Maybe. It's her. Maybe it's all of them. Some drivers think the mile is cursed. Others think it's something older, something that wears a voice to lure you in. I don't know, but I do know this. Every time I pass that stretch now, even from a detour miles away, I get this tight feeling in my chest. Like something's watching, waiting. I hear the hum, faint and soft. And once, just once, I heard it. Again in a motel room in Kingman, just after midnight. The static. Then the whisper. Right behind me. Wrong turn. They'd been driving too long. The Arizona sun had peeled the sky open, turning it into a searing white sheet that hung heavy over the desert. Tires hissed over the hot asphalt like snakes. There hadn't been a gas station for 50 miles. Not a sign of life for at least 30. No other cars, either. Just them, Mark and Elise, dragging their rented Ford Escape across the forgotten veins of old Route 66. headed toward nowhere in particular. They were trying to take the scenic route on their way to Los Angeles. Detour, they said. Something different, something nostalgic. Old America. Ghost towns and desert skies. Elise had picked up an old guidebook at a thrift shop back in Amarillo. Ludlow's got some history, she said, flipping through the yellowed pages with their creased corners. It used to be a big stop for travelers. There was even a hotel here, right off the highway. Called the Desert Star, Mark grunted. Sounds like a brothel. It's a motel, not a brothel. Same difference. But they were tired, sunburned, and cracked around the edges. When they saw the sign, an old neon cactus pointing down a dirt road, they turned without thinking. The letters flickered lazily. Desert Star Motel. The paint on the sign was sun-faded and peeling, but the building behind it stood crisp and strangely clean against the tan horizon. A long one-story structure, pale yellow with white doors. There were 10 units, all spaced neatly, and a tiny reception office up front with a rocking chair out front. A man sat there, thin as a reed, face shaded by a wide-brimmed hat. He looked up and smiled when they pulled in. "Evening," he said. "Y'all look like you could use a room." Mark hesitated. The place looked out of time, like it had been plucked from the early 70s and dropped into the desert intact. Elise, though, was already out of the car and stretching her legs. "How much for the night?" she asked. "$35, the man said. "Cash preferred, but I can do card." Mark stepped out and looked around. The place had no signs of life. No other cars, no guests, but everything was clean. The gravel lot was neat, the windows spotless, the cacti well kept. There was no buzzing of flies, no dust swirling in the wind, just the hum of the neon sign. "We'll take it?" Elise said. The man gave them room number 6. He handed over a real key, an old bronze thing attached to a diamond-shaped plastic tag. The room smelled faintly of lavender and bleach. 2 twin beds pushed together, floral comforters, a small black and white TV, and a rotary phone on the nightstand. Elise laughed when she saw it. This place is a time capsule. They showered, made love without much fanfare, then collapsed into the bed, sticky and exhausted. The air conditioner clunked and rattled but worked well enough. Outside, the desert whispered in long, slow exhales. Mark thought he heard music, some old country tune drifting in through the vents, but figured it was from the office or maybe another room. He fell asleep listening to Elise breathe. The sun woke them. No curtains, just an empty window, with harsh white light flooding the room. Except there was no room. They were lying in the open, on a mattress tossed across cracked asphalt. Dust caked their faces. Mark sat up fast, heart in his throat. The motel was gone. No building, no office. Just a lot, just a wide empty, dirt-covered lot with weeds growing through concrete and their rental car parked beside them, untouched. Room had vanished. So had the key, the beds, the TV, the sound of that strange old music. Elise sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. Her voice was hoarse. "Where? What the hell?" They stood, looking around. Nothing but empty desert. There were faded tire tracks where the gravel lot must have been, but they led to nowhere. A slab of what might have once been a foundation lay half covered in sand and sun-bleached boards dotted. Wasn't until they stumbled across the road and found the diner that they got answers. If you could call them that. The place was called Marla's, a squat little silver box with cracked windows and a buzzing open sign. Inside, it smelled of burnt coffee and onions. An old man in a greasy apron poured them water without asking. Mark told him what happened. The man didn't blink. "The Desert Star?" he said. "That place burned down in 71. Honeymooners were staying there. Whole damn building went up like a matchbox. Gas leak, they said. Killed both of them. Kids, just married." Mark and Elise stared. "You're wrong," Elise said, quietly. "We stayed there, last night. It was clean, new. We met the owner." The old man laughed, but not in a funny way. More like a bark. "There ain't no owner. Hasn't been one in 50 years. You been out in the heat too long." No. "We slept there," Mark's voice cracked. "There was a guy. He gave us a key. Room 6. The old man just shook his head. "There is no room 6. There ain't no rooms at all. Only thing still standing is the old septic tank out back." They went outside without finishing their water dot back across the road. The lot looked even more barren in the full sun. Just their car, a few tire tracks, no neon sign, no cactus. Just dirt, heat, and silence. Elise dug in her bag. "Where's the key?" she said. "The tag?" "It was red, I remember. It said room 6, but it was gone." So were the motel soaps, the receipt, the little matchbook Elise had taken from the counter. All of it vanished. Like a dream that slipped through your fingers as soon as you woke. Drove out of Ludlow without speaking dot. It wasn't until days later, when Elise was flipping through that old guidebook again in a San Diego hotel, that she found the picture. It was a grainy black and white photo from 1969 labeled Desert Star Motel, Route 66, Ludlow. The building was exactly the same. Same color, same sign, same number of rooms. There was a man sitting in a rocking chair out front. Thin, tall, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, smiling. He was younger, maybe, but it was him. No doubt. The same man who had handed them a room key. The same one who'd said, "Y'all look like you could use a room dot," and on the page next to it, an old newspaper clipping. "Tragedy in Ludlow. Young couple perish in motel blaze. July 3, 1971. Fire officials say a sudden gas leak caused a massive explosion at the Desert Star Motel early Saturday morning. A newlywed couple, identified as Charles and Angela Ford of Albuquerque, were staying in room 6. Their bodies were never recovered. Locals claim the site is haunted. Elise stared at the clipping for a long time. "We're not Charles and Angela." "No," Mark said. But the room, they'd stayed in room 6. That night he dreamt of fire. It wasn't a normal fire. It was quiet and slow. Not a roaring blaze, but a thick, rolling wave of smoke and heat that seemed to move with intention. The walls bubbled and melted, but he didn't move. Couldn't. He heard someone screaming in the hallway. A woman sobbing, and the faint sound of an old country tune playing through the static of a radio. Then he saw the man in the wide-brimmed hat. Not outside, but inside. Standing in the doorway of room 6, untouched by the fire, smiling with his teeth too wide for his face. Mark woke up choking. When he looked over, Elise was gone. She wasn't in the bed, not in the bathroom. Her things were still there, untouched. No note, no KEYCARD. The door was unlocked. There was a faint smell in the room like smoke, just on the edge of memory. Mark ran into the hallway, into the hotel lobby, into the parking lot. No one had seen her. He's still looking, still driving. Route 66 winds like a scar across the desert, and every so often, he passes a patch of cracked concrete and swears he sees it. The sign, the pale yellow siding, the rocking chair out front. Sometimes, in the distance, he sees someone walking down the shoulder of the road. A woman, her hair just like Elise's, her steps slow, like she's sleepwalking. But when he pulls over, she's gone. And the motel? It's never there, except once he swears he saw a flash of neon out the corner of his eye, just for a second. Room 6, vacancy. The first thing you notice when you get close to the Salton Sea isn't the heat, it's the smell. That thick, salty stench, mixed with rotting fish and stagnant water, wraps around you like a hot, wet rag. It creeps into your nostrils, clings to your clothes, and settles in your lungs like something alive. Even the wind carries it, so even when you're standing still, staring out across the unnatural flatness of the shore, it feels like the sea is exhaling on you. There's something not right about that place. Never has been. The Cantu family didn't know that. Or maybe they didn't care. Tourists still come here sometimes, despite the rumors, despite the smell, despite the strange glint the water takes on at dusk. They come with coolers and folding chairs, sunscreen and cameras, expecting to rough it for a couple of hours in the weird California desert. The Cantus came from Odessa, Texas. Joel and Denise, with their kids Maddie, 9, and little Robbie, 5. They were doing one of those family road trips, the kind where you try to stitch a family back together with long miles and gas station snacks. Denise had booked a stop at the Salton Sea. She'd read something about it in a blog post. An eerie, forgotten wonder, it had said, haunting in its beauty. They parked near Bombay Beach on the eastern edge, a place that looked more like the remains of a dream than an actual town. Crumbling buildings baked under the July sun, tagged with graffiti and surrounded by dry salt flats. There were only a few other cars around and no one else on the beach that afternoon, just a scattering of dead fish and the bones of old docks. The kids didn't care. Kids never do. They were just happy to be out of the car, out of that dry monotony of Interstate 10. Maddie took Robbie's hand and they darted down to the edge of the water while Joel unfolded lawn chairs and Denise fussed with the cooler dot at first. They just played. Tossed pebbles, made patterns in the briny sand. The water was low, exposing these long, pale stretches of shore that crunched beneath your feet like you were walking on old teeth. Maddie said the sand felt funny. Soft but sticky, like it wanted to hold onto her toes. They saw the first face maybe 20 minutes later. Maddie spotted it. She stopped mid-step, staring down into a shallow pool of brownish water. The sun was hitting it just right, filtering through the haze and giving the water this dull shimmer. Beneath it, just under the surface, was a face. A human face. Pale, swollen, and twisted in an expression of silent, eternal screaming. She screamed and pulled Robbie back. He looked, saw it too, and screamed louder. Joel came running, half annoyed, half concerned. When he got there, the face was gone. Just water again. Rippling gently, innocently. What the hell, Maddie? He snapped, but her face was white and her lip was trembling. There was a face, Daddy, I swear. A lady. She was screaming. Joel sighed. Denise came over, saw the kids' faces, and decided it was time to pack it up. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows from the piles of driftwood and salt-crusted rocks. Maddie cried all the way back to the car. In the rearview mirror, Joel saw her turn back and stare at the beach until it disappeared. That night, they stayed in a rundown motel on the outskirts of Brawley. One of those places with green carpet and buzzing fluorescents and a Coke machine that didn't work. Maddie wouldn't eat her dinner. She kept staring at her sketchbook. Denise tried to distract her, but eventually gave up and let her be. Robbie fell asleep with the TV on around midnight. Maddie came into their room holding her sketchbook. Her hands were shaking. She said she had a bad dream, but she was too scared to cry. Joel took the book and flipped through it. There were faces on the pages, not just 12. All of them screaming, all distorted, bloated like bodies left too long in water. Some were half melted, others cracked like porcelain. One near the center of the page made Joel's skin crawl. It looked like Denise. Her hair, her nose, even the necklace she always wore, a cheap little silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon. He forced a laugh and showed it to her. This is Mommy, isn't it? You're just being silly. Maddie looked up at him and whispered, That's what I saw. in the water. That was the face. I didn't know it was Mommy till just now. Denise took the book. Her hands froze when she saw the face, her own face. "Joel," she whispered, "let's go home. Tomorrow. No more stops." They left early the next morning before the sun rose. Denise drove while Joel dozed in the passenger seat. The road out of Brawley was flat and desolate. Not much to see but fields and heat shimmer. Around 6:40 a.m., Joel woke up to the sound of tires screeching. The car swerved hard to the right, then left again. Maddie screamed from the back seat. Joel caught a flash of Denise's face, twisted in panic. Then the world flipped. They never figured out what she swerved to avoid. No animals, no other cars. She hit a drainage ditch at 70 miles per hour. The front end crumpled like paper. Denise died instantly. Joel broke his leg. The kids were bruised and cut, but alive. The state trooper who arrived on scene said, Denise's eyes were open when he found her. Wide open, as if she'd seen something she couldn't understand. Something awful. Joel didn't speak for a week. He just sat in a chair in the hospital room and stared at nothing. Maddie never mentioned the drawing again, but she kept the sketchbook close. Carried it in her backpack even when she went back to school. One day, weeks later, her teacher called Joel in. She said Maddie had been drawing strange things. Faces. Again, and not just strangers. Some were kids from her class. One was the teacher herself. Always the same expression, screaming, drowning, dying. Joel threw the sketchbook away, but it came back. Maddie found it on her bed the next morning. Same drawings. A new one added, Joel's face. He burned it that time. Poured lighter fluid on it and set it ablaze in the bathtub. But the drawings kept coming. He started seeing things too, just little things at first. Ripples and puddles that had no wind. Faces in rain-streaked windows. At night, he heard water moving, not dripping, flowing, as if the sea was nearby. But they lived in Midland, 1,000 miles from the ocean. One evening, Robbie came into his room, pale and shaking. He said he'd been playing with his toy boats in the backyard kiddie pool, and one of them sank. When he reached down to grab it, he saw a face under the water. A man this time. And the man mouthed something. What did he say? Joel asked. Barely able to breathe. Robbie shrugged. I think he said, she's next. Joel moved them the next day. Sold the house, took a job in Amarillo. Changed phone numbers, tried to outrun whatever had followed them. But the water finds them, even in the desert. The last time anyone saw Joel, he was parked on the shoulder of a long stretch of State Highway 385. The road that cuts through the dead heart of Texas like a black knife. His truck was found idling, driver's door open. No signs of a struggle. No note. Just wet footprints. Leading away from the vehicle. Toward nothing. They found Maddie's sketchbook in the front seat. Every page was full. All faces. Hundreds of them. Screaming, broken, sunken. Some old. Some young. The last page was different. Just one face, half finished, no mouth yet. Just eyes. When Denise's sister flipped through it later, she recognized someone on page 3. A friend. Dead now. Drowned in a pool in Phoenix. That had happened a month after the crash. The last page still gives her nightmares. She's not sure why. But the face looks familiar. It looks like her. She had driven the Pacific Coast Highway 100 times, but never like this, never alone, never at night, never with her stomach knotted into this strange growing ball of unease. The moon was a pale smear behind the clouds and the ocean. To her left was black as ink. Waves invisible but thudding rhythmically against the rocks below. The guardrails, when they appeared, were rusty and skeletal. Her headlights cut swaths into the dark, and the two-lane road stretched like a ribbon of haunted film before her. Marcy wasn't new to night drives. She'd done plenty back home in Texas, cutting through long, flat highways under a sky so wide you could drown in it. But California was different. The road here was all curves and cliffs, sharp drops and blind turns, with nothing but the wind and the occasional brush of fog to keep you company. She didn't like how her own reflection kept catching her eye in the glass. That tired, pale woman with wide brown eyes blinking too often. She hadn't wanted to leave Santa Cruz so late, but the wedding had run long and she hadn't wanted to stay another night. The thought of another round of small talk, wine, and forced laughter made her skin itch. She had the windows up, the heater running low. Somewhere along the drive, the music had cut out. Her phone, still plugged in, now displayed a blank screen. Not dead. Just off, and it wouldn't turn back on. Her charger had power. Everything else was working. But the phone screen remained. Black? That was when she first noticed it. Just a shape. A vague blur in the rear view. A man. She blinked and sat up straighter, trying to get a clearer look. There was no one behind her, no headlights, no approaching vehicle. But she'd seen it. The curve of a shoulder, the slope of a head. Right there in the center of the back seat, Marcy let out a breath. "Get it together," she muttered, shaking her head. But then, 10 minutes later, another curve, another dark patch of forest pushing up against the road, and she saw him again. This time clearer. He was sitting upright, close to the middle, but leaning slightly to one side. His face was shadowed dark hair, sharp cheekbones, what might have been a smile or just a trick of the light. He didn't blink, didn't move, just stared straight ahead. She whipped around. The back seat was empty. Her pulse fluttered under her skin like something trapped. She hit the brakes gently, enough to slow the car but not enough to stop it. The car behind her, if there had been one, was gone. She'd been alone on the road for over half an hour. She glanced at the mirror again. Empty. Her hands were sweaty. She wiped them on her jeans. Maybe she was overtired. Maybe it was the fog and the tension from the wedding and the weird energy in the old inn she'd stayed at the night before. It had smelled like mildew and wood rot and the sea. Even though the windows had been shut, she turned the music back on. Or tried to, still nothing. No radio, no Bluetooth, not even static. Somewhere past Big Sur, the fog thickened. It poured in from the cliffs like ghostly smoke, swallowing the road. She slowed down to a crawl, gripping the wheel tight. And then the rearview mirror flickered. No lights, no cars, no trees, just a sudden, brief reflection of a face, closer this time. Just behind her headrest, Marcy screamed, twisting in her seat. Nothing. Still empty. But her breath came in short gasps now, and her fingers were trembling on the wheel. She thought about pulling over, but where? There was no shoulder, no turnout, just a narrow death strip of rock and dirt before the plunge. And something about stopping felt worse. She pressed the pedal. The car groaned a little, resisting like it didn't want to be here either. For the next 15 miles, she didn't look in the mirror. Not once. She focused on the curves, the lines on the road, the ocean noise now muffled and distant. Her body was stiff. Every now and then, she thought she felt something cold air on the back of her neck. The faint sound of breathing that wasn't hers, a presence just behind her shoulder, but when she reached back, there was nothing. When she finally dared a glance at the mirror again, it was cracked. A clean, fine web of fractures had spread from the center outward, from the inside. Marcy slammed the brakes. The tires skidded on gravel and she pulled to the side as best she could, heart racing. She killed the engine. The headlights stayed on. The fog curled through the beams like smoke. She sat there for a second, then opened the door and stepped out. The night air was cold, salty, and quiet. No traffic in either direction. Not even the hint of another vehicle. She opened the back door. Looked inside. Nothing. No one. The seats were still warm from the heater. She crouched, reached under the seats. Still nothing. She shut the door again, looked at the mirror. Still cracked, still pointing at the back seat. She got back in the car, sat there. Hands on the wheel, her breath fogged the glass, and in the moment, before it cleared, she thought she saw movement. She blinked, leaned forward. Something shifted, just slightly. The mirror stayed cracked. Then she saw a just beyond her peripheral. A face, pressed up behind the glass divider between the seats. But there was no divider. It was just an illusion, just the mirror. Playing tricks, but the face was wrong. The eyes were sunken. The skin tight and pale, like wax left out in the sun. No lips. Just a gaping line where a mouth should be. And it was smiling. Not at her. Through her. Her throat went dry. She didn't want to move, but she had to. She had to get out of here. Back to civilization. Anywhere with light. She started the car. Put it in drive. And in the mirror he was sitting there again. This time his head was tilted. Watching. She didn't turn around. Didn't speak. She drove. An hour later she reached a small gas station at the edge of Morro Bay. It was closed, but lit. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. She stumbled out of the car, blinking against the brightness. A man behind the glass inside the shop gave her a look, concerned, cautious. She gestured to him, tried to smile. Failed? Bathroom? She mouthed. He pointed. Around back. She walked slowly. The cold concrete under her boots felt oddly real, grounding. She kept glancing back at the car. It looked normal, ordinary, inside. The restroom. The mirror above the sink was grimy, but hold. She turned on the tap, splashed water on her face. Looked up. In the mirror, behind her nothing, just the stall door. The stained wall. She let out a breath. And the lights flickered. Once. Twice. She turned, heart leaping. Nothing. Turned back and the reflection was grinning. But she wasn't. She backed away. Slowly. Outside, the gas station man was gone. The lights. Inside flickered too. Her car door was open, not wide, just a crack. The driver's seat was empty, but in the back seat, a hand. Resting lightly on the headrest, long fingers. Pale as bone. Still. She stood frozen, unsure whether to scream or run or just keep watching, like her brain couldn't quite catch up to what was happening. Then the hand twitched, and the rearview mirror still cracked, shimmered slightly in the parking lot light, like it was breathing or watching. She never made it back to Texas. The police found her car the next morning, engine cold. Keys still in the ignition. The back seat empty. But the mirror. The mirror had a long crack spiraling out from the center. And if you looked closely, too closely, sometimes it looked like someone was sitting there. Waiting. They say if you're driving east along Niles Canyon Road in late April, somewhere past the Alameda Creek Bridge but before the old cement mill, you might hear it. You won't see anything at first. Just the wind hissing through eucalyptus trees that lean in close like they're eavesdropping. Just the sound of tires rolling over cracked asphalt. Maybe the occasional hoot of an owl. But then it starts quiet at first, almost like someone exhaling through clenched teeth. A low, dragging hiss, then the rhythm of it, the metallic pulse, chug, 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 building into something faster, closer, heavier. Like something big is moving right alongside you, but there's nothing there. No tracks, no engine. Just that sound, and the sudden feeling that the air's too heavy to breathe. I grew up in Fremont. Born in '79, raised in one of those boxy beige houses near Mission San Jose. People always said the canyon was haunted. But that's what they say about any place with a few bad stories attached to it. I didn't pay it much attention until I was 36, just divorced and driving Uber to make ends meet. One of my regular late-night routes was along Niles Canyon. People coming back from bars in Sunol, weirdos headed to hiking trails at midnight, the occasional teenager trying to spook their date. I'd heard the stories. I just didn't believe in any of it. Not until April 26, 2019. I had just dropped off a couple near the old quarry road, and I was headed back toward town, empty car, around 1:15 in the morning. It was misty, not raining, but the kind of night where the fog clings low to the ground, and every headlight beam turns into a spear of white. I remember glancing at my fuel gauge and thinking I should fill up soon. That's when I heard it dot. It didn't start loud. Just a hum, a vibration in my chest I couldn't place at first. My windows were up, radio off. I thought maybe a semi was coming around the bend behind me, so I checked my rear view. Nothing. Just road and fog. But then came the whistle. Long, mournful, high-pitched, and raw. It didn't sound like a modern horn. It sounded old, steam engine old. The kind of whistle you hear in old westerns, full of sadness, like it was crying through its teeth. Then the brakes. Oh God, the brakes! Like metal screaming against metal, the kind of screech that goes through your bones. My steering wheel shuddered. My whole car seemed to rattle, though the road was smooth. It felt like something was tearing itself apart. In the dark, and I had no choice but to drive through it dot, and then she was there dot at first. I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks. A shape on the shoulder, barely visible through the fog. But then she stepped out just a little into the lane, one hand lifted, palm out, like she was flagging me down. A girl, maybe 15, maybe younger. Long dark hair hanging down. Wet against her back and a dress that looked out of place. Like something from an old Sears catalog, white with tiny blue flowers. She didn't look up, just kept her hand out, stiff, not waving. Begging. I should have kept driving. Every instinct I had was screaming to go. But something else, a pull, like a string around my ribs, made me slow down. I rolled to a stop about 10 feet from her. The fog parted just enough to see her face. She was pale, but not dead pale. Not yet. Her eyes were wide, rimmed with red like she'd been crying, and her lips moved, but I couldn't hear her. I hit the button to lower my window. "You okay?" I asked dot. She nodded. A strange, shaky motion. Then she stepped toward the car. I unlocked the passenger door. She slid in silently, her dress rustling faintly against the seat. She didn't meet my eyes. Just stared forward, hands folded in her lap like she was in church. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. I suddenly hated the silence in the car. "Home," she said, barely a whisper. "They're waiting." I didn't ask who. I didn't ask where. I just started driving again. My GPS was dead screen frozen, and there were no streetlights on this stretch. Just the two beams of my headlights slicing the fog dot we drove for. What felt like hours, though the clock on my dash barely ticked forward. At some point I noticed the girl wasn't shivering, though it was cold enough to see my breath. She was dry too. The fog hadn't touched her. No dew on her dress, no frizz in her hair. She looked preserved, like a photograph someone had brought to life. "I was the only one," she said, still staring ahead. I glanced at her. "What?" "The only one who got out," she whispered. "The others burned. Or drowned, or broke. But I ran." "What?" "Others?" She turned then, slowly. Her eyes met mine, and I nearly swerved off the road. They weren't human eyes. They weren't glowing or bleeding or anything movie style. Just wrong. Too wide. Too glassy. Like doll's eyes left out in the sun too long, and there was something else reflection. Not mine, not the car, but flickering lights. "Like fire. I ran through the creek," she said. "But I got lost." I waited. I waited right here. She looked out the window, and that's when I saw it. A bend in the road I didn't recognize. A bridge that hadn't been there before, and beyond it lights, not car headlights. Not houses, lamps, old-time gas lamps flickering gold in the mist, and people. Dozens of them walking, limping, some missing arms, some in blackened uniforms, a man with no face, a woman with her scalp peeled back. All of them silent, walking toward us. I slammed the brakes. The girl smiled. I knew you'd come. She said dot. She opened the door and stepped out. Walked slowly toward the figures on the bridge. I screamed after her, told her to get back in the car. But she didn't turn around. The figures reached for her, and she walked into their arms. Then everything went black. I woke up in a ditch, sun rising behind the hills, car door open. Battery dead. My phone was back online, but the last ride had vanished from my app history. No sign of the girl. No footprints. Nothing. I drove home in silence. Didn't tell anyone for weeks. Not until I found an old newspaper article in a local history forum. April 27, 1927. A passenger train derailed on a temporary trestle over Alameda Creek. The track had washed out in a storm. 36 dead. All but one. A girl named Abigail Mooney, 15. Found wandering the woods days later, speaking gibberish, claiming the train wouldn't stop screaming. She died in a sanatorium in 1934. Suicide. Every April since, people report hearing the train. Screeching brakes. The whistle. Some say they see her on the side of the road, flagging them down. Most drive on, some don't. Those who stop, they don't come back. Now I only drive in daylight. I stay far from the canyon in spring, but every April, like clockwork, I hear it. Late at night, through the trees near my back fence, the whistle. That long, lonely scream. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see her standing there, waiting. He left Weaverville around 7:15 p.m., just as the sun was dipping behind the jagged horizon of the Trinity Alps, washing the forested ridgelines in deep gold and shadows. The air still carried that dry heat that clung to your clothes like a second skin, a hallmark of late August in Northern California, but dusk brought a creeping cool that hinted at the night waiting just beyond the mountains. He was tired, bone-deep tired, the kind that settles in your back and behind your eyes. He'd spent the day working on a water main leak just off the old logging roads north of town, under the buzz of a relentless sun and the smell of hot asphalt and pine sap. His name was Caleb Morse, 37 years old, divorced, 2 kids he saw every other weekend. He lived in Redding but made good money contracting out his plumbing skills to smaller towns and rural developments. The drive from Weaverville to Redding was familiar, almost comforting. Highway 299 wound through the Trinity National Forest in tight, sharp curves with long, lonely stretches that made you feel like the last man on Earth. Cell service was spotty at best through the middle of it, and by the time you reached Whiskeytown Lake, it opened up again into that wide, flat sprawl that meant you were getting close to home. He drove a beat-up white Tacoma with a cracked windshield and one stubborn wiper blade that squeaked when it moved. There was a half-empty bottle of Gatorade in the Q folder, country radio playing low, and the faint smell of soldered PVC lingering in his clothes. As the sun fully slipped behind the mountains, Caleb flicked on his headlights and settled in for the ride. It was near Helena, one of those blink and you'll miss it ghost towns with little more than a boarded-up post office and a rusted-out gas pump that his phone buzzed in the dash mount. Unknown number. The screen lit up blue against the dark, a flicker of something unnatural in the dim of the cab. He glanced at it, thinking maybe it was one of his guys or maybe even Jenny, his ex-wife, calling about the kids. He let it ring twice. Then a third time. On the fourth ring, curiosity got the better of him. He thumbed the green button. Hello? There was no response at first. Just the faint crackle of an open line, the kind you'd get from an old analog phone left off the hook. Then a voice, low and rough like gravel scraped across concrete. Turn around. That was all. 2 words. Not angry. Not urgent. Just wrong. Who is this? Caleb asked, already feeling a chill slip under the collar of his shirt. But the line had gone dead. He tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and shook his head. Some prank. Some asshole with a spoofed number trying to scare folks. Maybe a YouTube stunt. But still, his hand was tight on the wheel, his knuckles pale in the low light. The forest. Pressed in on both sides of the highway, black pines rising like sentinels in the dark, and the road ahead seemed to stretch further than it should have, twisting unnaturally through the hills. Then came the voicemails. The first one buzzed in 5 minutes later, then another, then 5 more in quick succession. By the time he passed through Junction City, his phone screen showed a list of over 20 messages, all from the same unknown number. He pulled off at a turnout near the Big Bar Ranger station, put the truck in park, and played the first voicemail. Silence. Second message, more silence, but not the digital kind. Not the dead air you get from a bad connection. It was heavier. Like something was waiting on the line. Like something was listening. He skipped to the last message, and that's when he heard it. It was his voice, but not like he was now. It was a voice soaked in panic, guttural and raw, screaming, "No, no. Help me. Oh God, please, no, no." A crashing sound. Metal twisting. Then nothing. He stared at the phone, his hand suddenly numb. His reflection in the windshield looked unfamiliar, distorted by the fine spiderweb crack that ran across the glass. For a moment he imagined seeing something moving. In the trees just beyond the turnout, something pale and too tall, hunched like it didn't know how to wear its own skin. He turned off the radio and rolled up the windows. Then he drove. He didn't stop again. Not even when he saw the car parked at the side of the road just past Burnt Ranch, half hidden in the trees. It was an old Crown Vic, faded green like something a forest ranger or state trooper might have used in the 80s. The driver's side door was open. No one inside. The air inside the cab grew colder, inexplicably so, and a headache throbbed just behind Caleb's eyes. He gripped the wheel and kept his gaze straight ahead. Don't look in the rear view. Don't. But he did. The back seat was empty. He didn't remember getting home, not clearly. The details were smudged like a dream half remembered. He knew he must have pulled into the driveway around 9:30, maybe 10, because the neighbor's porch. Light was still on and the sound of a distant lawn sprinkler hissed in the night. But when he stepped inside, everything felt off-kilter. His boots left muddy prints on the tile. The kitchen clock was blinking 12 o'clock like the power had gone out. And his hands wouldn't stop shaking. That night, the dreams came. He was in the truck again, driving Highway 299. Except it wasn't night. It was never-ending twilight, that weird blue light right before the sun vanishes completely. And the road didn't behave like it should. It looped, spiraled, descended into impossible valleys, rose up into jagged switchbacks that bled into fog. The trees moved when he wasn't looking. The sky seemed to pulse. And always, just behind him, something was following. The dream always ended the same way. He'd come around a bend too fast. See the broken guardrail. Feel the truck lift off the road. And as he tumbled through the air, as the windshield shattered and the world turned upside down, he heard his own voice again screaming. That same scream from the voicemail. He stopped driving Highway 299 after that. Took the long way to Weaverville. When he had to go back, sometimes adding 2 hours to his trip, told people the road gave him motion sickness. No one argued. That road had a reputation. But it didn't stop. The phone calls kept coming. Always late. Always unknown numbers. He stopped answering them. Changed his number twice. Switched carriers. Got a landline installed. But every now and then, around dusk, the phone would buzz and it would be him on the other end. Screaming, pleading, like some version of himself was trapped in that final moment, looping through time, begging for a chance to rewrite the ending. One night, maybe a month after it all started, he found muddy footprints inside his house. They led from the front door to the bathroom mirror. Nothing stolen, nothing broken. Just those prints and something carved into the steam-fogged mirror. Turn around. He moved 3 months later. Sold the house, bought a condo in Chico. Avoided the woods. Avoided the roads. Still, the calls came. He started drinking again. It helped him sleep, but only just. Some nights he'd hear the sound of gravel under tires outside his window, but when he looked, there was never anything there. Just the wind through the trees and the long, empty hum of the California night. One morning, he woke to find his truck missing. Stolen, the cops said. No signs of forced entry, no leads. He told them not to look too hard. Let it go, but 3 weeks later, they found it. Wrecked out at the bottom of a ravine off Highway 299, just west of Helena, upside down. Engine cold? No blood. No body. Just the cracked windshield and a cell phone on the dash, still recording.